Sirens blare as Yadrin soldiers storm the Stargazer, their advanced weaponry reducing Powell's ship to a prison in mere moments. The human captain's protests fall on deaf ears as he's dragged from the bridge, watching helplessly as his crew is rounded up and his vessel confiscated. You're trespassing in restricted Yadrin space. A towering alien officer snarls, forcibly removing Powell's captain's insignia. Prepare for detention and interrogation. Powell's mind races. The navigation malfunction, the uncharted sector, the sudden appearance of the Yadrin patrol. It all happened so fast. Now, as he's shoved into a holding cell aboard the massive Nexus 7 space station, the gravity of the situation crashes down on him. The cell door hisses shut, leaving Powell alone in the sterile, high-security chamber. Hours pass before an unexpected visitor arrives, a Yadrin female in a scientist's uniform. "I'm Vita," she whispers, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Something about your capture doesn't add up. The official story. It's full of holes." Powell leans closer, desperate for information. Vita's words paint a grim picture. Escalating tensions between humans and Yadrins, territorial disputes, competition for resources in this sector of the galaxy. And now, his crew faces execution for alleged espionage while Yadrin engineers tear apart the Stargazer, probing its secrets. Determination hardens in Powell's gut. He won't let his people die, won't let his ship become a weapon against humanity. With limited access to computer terminals in his cell, he begins to study the station's systems, searching for weaknesses. Days of careful probing reveal a critical vulnerability in Nexus 7's power grid. Powell's eyes widen as he realizes the implications. With the right sequence of commands, he could overload the entire station, turning it into a massive, destructive weapon. The thought sends a chill down his spine. Such an action could cause catastrophic damage, potentially killing thousands of Yadrins and humans alike. But as he weighs the moral implications, a conversation between passing guards freezes his blood. The attack on the human colony is scheduled for tomorrow. One Yadrin soldier grunts. Using tech from that captured ship, we'll wipe them out before they know what hit them. Powell's fists clench. The stakes have just skyrocketed. It's no longer just about his crew and his ship. An entire human settlement hangs in the balance. Time is running out. With trembling fingers, he accesses the computer terminal once more. The station's power grid schematic glows on the screen, the vulnerability a glaring weak point. Powell takes a deep breath, his mind racing through potential outcomes, searching for a solution that doesn't end in massacre. They took his crew, his ship, and his freedom. Now, Powell must decide if he's willing to make their station his weapon and live with the consequences. Powell's fingers hovered over the terminal, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The station's power grid pulsed on the screen, its vulnerability taunting him. But as he prepared to input the commands that would overload the system, a new plan crystallized in his mind. He accessed the maintenance scheduling system, exploiting a minor glitch he discovered during his days of careful probing. With practiced efficiency, Powell programmed a series of non-critical system checks, each requiring specific security doors to open simultaneously. He double-checked his work, ensuring the timing was perfect. The cell door hissed open, revealing Vita. Her eyes darted nervously down the corridor as she stepped inside. "I've uncovered something," she whispered, her antennae twitching with agitation. "Your capture, the accusations. It's all part of a larger scheme. There's corruption at the highest levels of Yadrin command." Powell leaned closer, his heart racing. "What kind of corruption?" "The kind that wants war," Vita replied, her voice barely audible. "They're using you to provoke a conflict with humans. But I can help you escape, stop the attack on your colony." Powell nodded, his mind racing. "I've got a plan, but I'll need your help. Can you arrange for me to be transferred to a different holding area?" Vita's eyes widened with understanding. I'll make it happen. Minutes later, Powell found himself being escorted through the station's winding corridors. He counted the seconds, waiting for his program maintenance checks to begin. Suddenly, a series of security doors slid open with a synchronized hiss. Powell acted instantly. He drove his elbow into the gut of the nearest guard, using the Yatteran's momentary shock to his advantage. Vita moved with surprising speed, her fingers finding pressure points that left the second guard unconscious before he could raise an alarm. "This way," Vita urged, leading Powell through the maze of open doorways. They sprinted through the station, narrowly avoiding patrols and ducking into maintenance shafts. Powell's heart pounded in his ears as they finally reached the engineering sector. The main power grid was just ahead, but as they rounded the corner, they came face to face with an imposing Yatteran in an ornate uniform. "Chief Engineer Zorn," Vita gasped, instinctively stepping in front of Powell. Zorn's eyes narrowed, his hand moving towards a console. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his deep voice rumbling with authority. Powell saw the flashing light on the console, a silent alarm. He knew they had mere moments before security converged on their location. His gaze fell on a nearby display, confirming the power grid vulnerability he'd discovered earlier. Taking a deep breath, Powell stepped forward. "Chief Engineer, I know this looks bad, but you need to hear me out. Your leaders are lying to you. They orchestrated my capture to provoke a war with humans." Zorn's antennae twitched skeptically. "Preposterous. Why should I believe the words of an escaped prisoner?" "Because I have proof," Vita interjected, producing a data chip from her uniform. "Classified communications, altered sensor logs. It's all here." Powell pressed on, aware of the precious seconds ticking away. "They're planning an attack on a human colony, using technology stolen from my ship. Thousands of innocent lives are at stake." Zorn's stoic expression wavered as he processed the information. In the distance, the sound of approaching security forces echoed through the corridors. "If what you say is true," Zorn said slowly, "the consequences would be catastrophic." Powell nodded grimly. "Which is why we need your help. You have the authority to stop this before it's too late." Zorn's gaze shifted between Powell, Vita, and the incriminating data chip. The pounding of boots grew louder, security forces closing in on their position. "What you're asking," Zorn said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision, "would be a direct violation of my sworn duty." "Your duty is to protect your people," Powell countered. "This war would devastate both our civilizations. Help us expose the truth, Chief Engineer. It's the only way to prevent needless bloodshed." Zorn's antennae quivered with inner conflict. He looked at the flashing console, then back at Powell and Vita. The thundering footsteps were almost upon them. "Very well," Zorn said, his voice barely above a whisper. He moved to a nearby terminal, his fingers flying across the alien interface. "I'm granting you access to the main power grid. Whatever you're planning, do it quickly." Powell wasted no time. He input a series of commands, carefully manipulating the power flow without triggering a catastrophic overload. Warnings flashed across the screen as he pushed the system to its limits. "What are you doing?" Vita asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Creating a diversion," Powell replied, his focus never leaving the screen. "And sending a message our corrupted friends can't ignore." The engineering bay doors burst open, security forces flooding in with weapons raised. But before they could act, the station shuddered violently. Emergency klaxons blared as sections of the Nexus 7 went dark. In the chaos that followed, Powell knew their real challenge was just beginning. With Zorn's reluctant aid and Vita's insider knowledge, they had a chance to expose the truth and prevent a devastating war. But first, they needed to survive the next few minutes and find a way off the station. As backup power systems engaged and confused shouting filled the air, Powell exchanged determined looks with his unlikely allies. The fate of two civilizations now rested in their hands. Powell's fingers flew across the terminal, his eyes darting between the power grid schematics and the approaching security forces. Zorn's gaze shifted between the human and the flashing console. Indecision etched across his alien features. "Chief Engineer," Powell said, his voice low and urgent, "we don't have much time. Your people, my people, thousands of lives hang in the balance. Help us stop this before it's too late." Zorn's antennae quivered, his inner conflict visible in every twitch. Then, with a decisive motion, he stepped forward and deactivated the silent alarm. "What you ask is treason," Zorn rumbled. "But if what you say is true, inaction would be a far greater crime." Relief washed over Powell as Zorn's clawed hands joined his on the terminal. Together, they began manipulating the station's power grid, initiating a cascade of control fluctuations throughout Nexus 7. Lights flickered and dimmed across the engineering bay. In the distance, confused shouts echoed through the corridors as non-critical systems began to malfunction. "I've ordered a station-wide diagnostic," Zorn announced, his fingers dancing across the alien interface. "It should buy us some time and mask our activities." Powell nodded, his focus never wavering from the task at hand. He delved deeper into the station's systems, pushing past firewalls and security protocols with a combination of human ingenuity and Zorn's inside knowledge. Vita's eyes widened as she watched the two work in silent synchronicity. "What can I do?" she asked, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. Powell glanced up, his expression grim. "We need evidence of the corruption, concrete proof of the planned attack. Can you access the secure communication hub?" Vita's mandibles clicked with willpower. "Consider it done," she said, slipping out of the engineering bay and into the chaos beyond. As Powell worked to gain control over the station's weapon systems, a shrill alarm cut through the air. Red warning lights bathed the engineering bay in an eerie glow. "The reactor," Zorn growled, his claws flying across a nearby terminal. "The power fluctuations have triggered an emergency shutdown sequence." Powell's stomach dropped. Without the reactor, they'd lose control over everything: life support, artificial gravity, and any leverage they'd gained. He abandoned his work on the weapon systems and turned his full attention to the reactor crisis. "Talk me through your coolant systems," Powell demanded, his mind racing through potential solutions. Zorn's explanation was punctuated by the groaning of metal as the station shuddered around them. Powell's fingers became a blur, inputting commands and adjusting parameters with lightning speed. "Reroute auxiliary power to the stabilization matrix," Powell ordered, sweat beading on his forehead. "We need to maintain core temperature without overloading the containment field." The reactor's angry howl began to subside as Powell's adjustments took effect. He let out a shaky breath, allowing himself a moment of relief before diving back into the station's core systems. With their control over Nexus 7 solidified, Powell began the delicate process of transforming the station into a formidable weapon. He carefully calibrated targeting systems and power distribution, ensuring he could demonstrate the station's offensive capabilities without causing actual damage. A priority communication alert flashed on Zorn's terminal. The chief engineer's eyes widened as he read the message. "It's from Admiral Krell," Zorn said, his voice tight with tension. "He's ordering immediate preparation for the attack on your colony." Powell's lips pursed. "We're out of time. Where's Vita?" As if summoned by his words, the Yadrin scientist burst into the engineering bay, clutching a data chip in her hand. "I have it," she panted, her antennae quivering with excitement. "Communications logs, altered sensor data, everything we need to expose the corruption." Powell nodded, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Then it's time we had a chat with your leadership." He input a final sequence of commands, feeling the station hum with potential energy around him. Nexus 7 was now under their control, a weapon poised to strike, or to force a peaceful resolution. Open a channel to Admiral Krell, Powell instructed Zorn. Let's see if we can't change the course of this war before it begins. As Zorn complied, the main view screen flickered to life. The stern face of Admiral Krell filled the display, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion at the unexpected communication. Powell stepped forward, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Admiral Krell," he began, "I believe we have some urgent matters to discuss." "Discuss." Powell's voice rang out clear and confident, despite the chaos unfolding around them. Admiral Krell's eyes narrowed, his antennae twitching with nearly unleashed rage. "You dare to contact me, human? Your escape attempt will fail, and you will face the consequences of your actions." Powell's fingers flew across the console, activating the station's advanced communication systems. "This isn't just about me, Admiral. It's about the truth, and it's time everyone heard it." With a decisive keystroke, Powell initiated a station-wide broadcast. His voice echoed through every corridor, chamber, and docking bay of Nexus 7, reaching the ears of every Yadran on board. "Attention, all personnel of Nexus 7 and nearby Yadran ships. This is Lieutenant Commander James Powell of the Earth Alliance. I have uncovered evidence of corruption at the highest levels of your command structure. Admiral Krell and his conspirators have orchestrated a plot to provoke war with humanity, planning an unprovoked attack on one of our colonies." Vita stepped forward, her voice joining Powell's. "I am Vita, Chief Scientist of Nexus 7. I can confirm the veracity of these claims. The data chip I hold contains irrefutable proof of altered sensor logs, classified communications, and plans for the attack." As they spoke, Zorn worked feverishly to transmit the incriminating data to key figures within the Yadran government and military. The effect was immediate. Confused chatter filled the communication channels as Yadran officers and crew members tried to make sense of the shocking revelations. Admiral Krell's face contorted with fury. "This is treason. Security forces, converge on the engineering bay immediately. Terminate the human and his conspirators." The sound of heavy footsteps and plasma torches cutting through metal filled the air. Commander Thax, a towering Yadran with cold, calculating eyes, led the charge towards the engineering bay. Powell's hands danced across the terminal, activating Nexus 7's defensive systems. Force fields sprang to life, blocking corridors and redirecting the advancing security forces. He then accessed the station's external weapon arrays, targeting but not firing upon the nearby Yadran ships. "Admiral," Powell warned, his voice steady, "I now have control over Nexus 7's offensive capabilities. Stand down your forces, or I'll be forced to demonstrate just how serious I am about preventing this war." Suddenly, a new transmission cut through the chaos. Commander Sarah Taylor's face appeared on a secondary screen, her expression a mix of tenacity and relief. "Powell, we've managed to partially free ourselves from the holding cells. What's our next move?" Powell's heart leapt at the sight of his first officer. "Taylor, thank God. Make your way to the hangar bay where they're holding the Stargazer. I'm sending you access codes and the safest route to avoid patrols now." As Powell coordinated with his crew, Vita worked furiously at a nearby console, reaching out to her contacts within the Yadran government. "I'm presenting our evidence to sympathetic officials," she reported. "It's causing quite a stir in the chain of command." Zorn, meanwhile, focused on keeping the station's critical systems operational. "I'm locking Admiral Krell and his loyalists out of the main computer," he growled, his claws flying across the interface. "They won't be able to regain control easily." The engineering bay shuddered as Commander Thax's forces breached the outer defenses. Powell knew they were running out of time. With a grim smile, he initiated his next move. "Hang on," he warned Vita and Zorn. Things are about to get a little unpredictable. Powell triggered a controlled overload in a series of non-critical power relays throughout the station. Lights flickered and died in various sectors, and the distant sound of confused shouts echoed through the corridors as Yadrin security forces found themselves cut off and disoriented. On the main view screen, Powell watched as several Yadrin ships broke formation, their captains unwilling to engage without clear justification. The Yadrin fleet was divided, some remaining loyal to Admiral Krell, while others demanded explanations. Seizing the moment, Powell opened a direct channel to the Yadrin High Council. The stern faces of the council members appeared on the screen, their antennae twitching with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Honorable members of the High Council, Powell began, his voice steady and resolute. I come to you with grave news and incontrovertible evidence of corruption within your military leadership. Admiral Krell has orchestrated a plot to provoke war with humanity, planning an unprovoked attack on one of our colonies. He gestured to Vita, who stepped forward with the data chip. This evidence, collected by your own chief scientist, proves beyond doubt the extent of this deception. Powell's fingers danced across the console, bringing up a tactical display of Nexus 7 and its weapon systems. As you can see, I currently have control over the station's formidable arsenal. I have no desire to use it, but I will have force to defend ourselves and prevent this unjust war. His eyes locked with those of the council members as he delivered his ultimatum. I ask you to take immediate action. Stand down the attack on our colony, release my crew, and launch a full investigation into Admiral Krell's activities. Failure to do so will leave me no choice but to use every means at my disposal to protect innocent lives, both human and Yadrin. The council chambers erupted into a flurry of agitated clicking and twitching antennae. Before they could respond, however, a new signal cut to the communication channels. This is General Zar, a deep, authoritative voice announced. I have entered the sector with my personal fleet and demand a full account of the situation from both Admiral Krell and the human Powell. Powell's mind raced as he assessed this new development. General Zar's reputation for integrity was well known, even among humans. His arrival could tip the scales in their favor, or spell disaster for their entire plan. As the engineering bay trembled under the renewed assault of Commander Thax's forces, Powell knew the next few moments would be crucial. He glanced at Vita and Zorn, their alien faces etched with persistence, then turned back to face the view screen where General Zar awaited his response. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, and Powell knew his next words could mean the difference between peace and interstellar war. War. Powell took a deep breath, steadying himself for the crucial moments ahead. General Zar, he began, his voice calm but authoritative, I appreciate your intervention. Allow me to present the full scope of the situation. With a few swift keystrokes, Powell activated Nexus 7's advanced holographic projection system. The engineering bay filled with a shimmering display of data, sensor logs, and intercepted communications. The evidence gathered by Vita materialized in vivid detail, clearly demonstrating Admiral Krell's corruption and the planned attack on the human colony. As you can see, Powell explained, gesturing to the holographic array, Admiral Krell has been orchestrating a plot to provoke war between our species. This evidence is being broadcast to all ships in the sector, leaving no room for doubt. General Zar's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized the display. His antennae twitched thoughtfully, processing the overwhelming amount of information before him. After a tense moment, he spoke, his voice resonating with authority. Admiral Krell, in light of this evidence, I order you to stand down immediately. We will conduct a full investigation into these allegations. Krell's face contorted with rage on the interface. You have no authority over me, Zar. This human has manipulated you with lies and deception. Without warning, Krell barked an order to his loyalist ships. Open fire on Nexus 7. We must regain control and eliminate this threat. Powell's fingers flew across the console, activating the station's newly enhanced shield systems. The incoming barrage of energy weapons splashed harmlessly against the shimmering barrier. "I expected you might try something like this, Admiral," Powell said, his voice steady. He input a series of commands, and Nexus 7's weapon systems hummed to life. With surgical precision, a concentrated beam lanced out, striking Krell's lead ship. The vessel's weapon systems went dark, disabled but otherwise unharmed. General Zar's antennae perked up, impressed by the display of both power and restraint. "Remarkable. You could have destroyed that ship, yet you chose to merely disable it." Powell nodded grimly. "This isn't about destruction, General. It's about preventing an unjust war and saving lives on both sides." As the standoff unfolded in space, Commander Sarah Taylor led her team through the winding corridors of Nexus 7. They encountered sporadic resistance, but their superior close-quarters combat training allowed them to subdue their opponents without causing serious harm. Reaching the hangar bay, they found a group of Yadrin engineers hunched over various components of the Stargazer. Taylor signaled her team, and they burst into action. The ensuing skirmish was brief but intense, with the humans using their agility and hand-to-hand skills to overcome the surprised Yadrins. As the last engineer slumped to the ground, Taylor approached the Stargazer. Her eyes widened as she took in the modifications made to the ship. Yadrin technology had been seamlessly integrated into the human vessel, creating a hybrid unlike anything she had seen before. "Powell," she called over the comm. "We've secured the Stargazer, but you're not going to believe what they've done to her." Back in the engineering bay, Powell, Vita, and Zorn found themselves cornered as Commander Thax's security forces finally breached the outer defenses. Plasma torches cut through the last barrier, and Thax's towering form stepped through the opening. "Surrender now," Thax growled, his weapon trained on Powell. Zorn's claws danced across a nearby console. "Not today, old friend," he muttered. Suddenly, the lights in the corridor flickered and died. In the confusion, Zorn grabbed Powell and Vita, pulling them towards a concealed maintenance hatch. "This way," he hissed, guiding them through a maze of service tunnels and hidden passages. The sounds of Thax's frustrated roars echoed behind them, growing fainter as they put distance between themselves and their pursuers. As they emerged from a narrow conduit, Powell's communicator crackled to life. General Zar's voice came through, tinged with a mix of suspicion and respect. "Commander Powell, your actions today have been unexpected. I am willing to hear your full account of these events and consider a peaceful resolution. However, be warned, any further aggressive actions from either side could lead to full-scale conflict." Powell opened his mouth to respond, but a sudden alarm cut him off. On a nearby display, he watched as several ships from Krell's fleet broke formation, setting a course away from Nexus 7. Vita's antennae twitched frantically. "They're heading for your colony." Krell must be trying to carry out the attack himself. Powell's mind raced, weighing his options. He needed to maintain control of Nexus 7 to ensure his crew's safety, but he couldn't let Krell reach the human colony. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, and Powell knew he had to act fast. A plan began to form in his mind, audacious and risky, but with the potential to change everything. He turned to address General Zar, his voice filled with urgency and conviction. "General, I have a proposal. One that could not only stop Krell, but also demonstrate the potential for cooperation between our species. Are you willing to take a chance on peace?" As General Zar considered Powell's words, the human commander glanced at Vita and Zorn. Their alien faces showed a mixture of fear and perseverance, mirroring Powell's own emotions. Whatever came next would shape the future of human-Yadrin relations for generations to come. Powell took a deep breath, preparing to outline his daring plan. The next few moments would determine whether they could avert a war and forge a new path forward, or if the galaxy would plunge into a conflict that could destroy them all. General Czar's antennae twitched thoughtfully as he considered Powell's words. After a tense moment, he nodded, his compound eyes gleaming with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Very well, Commander Powell. I'm willing to hear your proposal. What do you have in mind? Powell's fingers flew across the console, bringing up a tactical display of the sector. Admiral Krell's ships are en route to our colony. We need to stop them, but we can't do it alone. I propose a joint operation. Human and Yadran forces working together to prevent this attack and expose Krell's treachery. As Powell outlined his plan, the engineering bay hummed with activity. Zorn's claws danced across the interfaces, establishing a secure link between Nexus 7 and the Stargazer. The connection would allow Powell to maintain partial control over the station's systems, even while pursuing Krell, ensuring he could still use it as leverage if needed. Fascinating, Vita murmured, her antennae quivering with excitement as she examined the Stargazer's newly integrated systems. The combination of our technologies has created an unexpected synergy. Commander, the ship's speed and sensor capabilities have been significantly enhanced. Powell nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. That gives us an edge. We'll need every advantage we can get. Suddenly, the sound of plasma torches cutting through metal echoed through the corridors. Commander Thax and his security forces had finally broken through the last of Powell's obstacles. Time to move, Powell said, gesturing to Vita and Zorn. Let's get to the hangar bay. As they made their way through the winding service tunnels, Powell's communicator crackled to life. Commander Sarah Taylor's voice came through, tinged with urgency. Powell, we've secured the Stargazer. But you need to see these modifications for yourself. It's like nothing we've ever encountered. Copy that, Sarah. We're on our way. Prepare for immediate departure. They emerged into the hangar bay just as Thax's forces stormed the main control room, finding it empty. Powell allowed himself a small smile at the thought of the Yadran commander's frustration. As Powell and his team approached the Stargazer, they were met by a group of Yadran officers, their antennae twitching nervously. General Czar has ordered us to accompany you, one of them explained. He believes this mission requires cooperation between our species. Powell nodded, recognizing the historic nature of the moment. Welcome aboard. Let's show both our peoples what we can achieve together. As the mixed crew boarded the Stargazer, Vita busied herself with the hybrid systems, fine-tuning the integration of human and Yadran technology. Powell made his way to the bridge, where Sarah Taylor awaited him. Status report, he ordered, settling into the captain's chair. All systems operational, Taylor responded. The Yadran modifications have increased our speed and sensor range by nearly 50%. We're ready for launch. Powell opened a channel to Nexus 7. Zorn, are you linked in? The Yadran engineer's gravelly voice came through clearly. Affirmative. I have access to all critical systems. I'll keep the station secure and provide support as needed. Excellent. General Czar, we're ready to depart. Any final words? The general's stern face appeared on the screen. Good hunting, Commander Powell. Stop Krell and prevent this war. The future of both our peoples depends on it. As the Stargazer lifted off, Powell received a priority transmission from Earth Space Command. The news was grim. Krell's ships had been detected, and while a defensive fleet was being mobilized, it wouldn't arrive in time to prevent the initial attack. Helm, set course for the colony, Powell ordered, his voice tight with grit. Maximum speed. We're the only thing standing between Krell and all-out war. The Stargazer streaked away from Nexus 7, its hybrid engines pulsing with unprecedented power. As they entered faster-than-light travel, Powell addressed the mixed crew on the bridge. I know the situation is unprecedented for all of us, he began, looking from human to Yadran faces. but we have a chance to prevent a catastrophe and forge a new path for both our species. Let's make it count. The ship's enhanced sensors soon detected Krell's fleet, 5 heavily armed Yadrin warships, approaching the border of human-controlled space. Powell studied the tactical display, his mind racing through potential strategies. "We're outgunned," Sarah Taylor observed, her voice low. "Even with our upgrades, we can't take on 5 warships in direct combat." Powell nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "We're not going to fight them. We're going to stop them in their tracks." He turned to Vita, who was monitoring the hybrid systems. "Vita, I need you to do something unprecedented. Can we use our new technology to create a localized disruption in space-time?" Vita's antennae twitched rapidly as she considered the possibility. "Theoretically, yes. It would be similar to a small-scale wormhole effect. But, Commander, the risks are significant. We've never tested anything like this before." "What are the potential consequences?" Powell asked, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Best-case scenario, we create a disruption that forces Krell's ships to drop out of faster-than-light travel, giving us a chance to confront him," Vita explained. "Worst case, we could damage or destroy his ships, or even strand ourselves in deep space." The bridge fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. Powell knew that his next decision could determine the fate of not just the human colony, but potentially the future of human-Yadrin relations. "We have to take the risk," he said finally. "Prepare the systems for the space-time disruption. We'll have one shot at this. Let's make it count." As the Stargazer closed in on Krell's position, tension on the bridge reached a fever pitch. Humans and Yadrins worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of their shared goal. "We're in range," Sarah Taylor announced. "Awaiting your order, sir." Powell took a deep breath, acutely aware of the weight of the moment. With a nod, he gave the command that would change the course of history. "Initiate the disruption." The Stargazer's hybrid system surged to life, emitting a pulsating energy field that stretched out towards Krell's fleet. As the disruption took effect, the view screen filled with a swirling vortex of light and energy. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. Then chaos erupted. The view screen filled with a swirling maelstrom of light and energy as the space-time disruption took effect. Powell gripped the arms of his chair, his squeezing hard as the Stargazer shuddered under the strain of the unprecedented maneuver. "Status report," he barked, his eyes never leaving the tumultuous display before him. Sarah Taylor's fingers danced across her console, her voice tense but steady. "The disruption is expanding rapidly, sir. It's reaching Krell's fleet. Now." The effect was immediate and dramatic. The 5 Yadrin warships, caught in the midst of faster-than-light travel, suddenly materialized in normal space. Their sleek hulls gleamed in the light of nearby stars as they tumbled end over end, their crews clearly disoriented by the abrupt deceleration. "Vita, analysis," Powell commanded, leaning forward in his seat. The Yadrin scientist's antennae quivered with excitement as she studied the readouts. "The disruption worked better than expected, Commander. Krell's ships have been completely destabilized. Their power systems are fluctuating wildly." Powell nodded, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Excellent. Helm, bring us about. Position us between Krell and the colony." The Stargazer's hybrid engines pulsed with energy as the ship maneuvered into place. On the tactical display, Powell could see Krell's flagship, its power signature erratic and weakening. "Sir," Sarah interrupted, her voice urgent, "I'm detecting a massive power surge from Krell's ship. They're attempting to bring their main weapon systems online." Powell's mind raced, weighing his options in a split second. Weapons. Prepare a targeted electromagnetic pulse. Use the hybrid systems to amplify it. We need to knock out that ship before Krell can fire. The tension on the bridge was palpable as the weapons officer input the commands. A low hum filled the air as the Stargazer systems charged up. "Pulse ready, sir," the weapons officer reported. Powell took a deep breath. "Fire." A burst of invisible energy erupted from the Stargazer, streaking across space towards Krell's flagship. It struck the Yatteran vessel with pinpoint accuracy, washing over its hull in a cascade of electrical discharges. The effect was immediate. The warship's lights flickered and died, its weapons powering down as the EMP overwhelmed its systems. "Direct hit," Sarah exclaimed. "Krell's ship is disabled." Powell wasted no time. "Open a channel to the remaining Yatteran vessels. Wide broadcast." As the communications officer complied, Powell stood, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. "Attention, Yatteran ships. This is Commander John Powell of the Earth vessel Stargazer. You have been deceived. Admiral Krell has manipulated you into this attack under false pretenses. We have evidence of his corruption and the true nature of his plans." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You have a choice to make. Stand down and assist us in apprehending Admiral Krell, or face the consequences of attacking a human colony without just cause. The technology you've just witnessed is but a fraction of what we're capable of when we work together. Make your decision." The bridge fell silent as they waited for a response. Seconds stretched into minutes, feeling like an eternity. Suddenly, alarms blared across the bridge. Vita's eyes widened as she studied her console. "Commander, the space-time disruption, it's having unforeseen effects. Gravitational anomalies are forming in the surrounding area." Powell turned to the main view screen, watching in disbelief as nearby asteroids and space debris began to move, pulled by invisible forces towards their position. "The anomalies are drawing in everything within range," Sarah reported, her voice tight with concern. "At this rate, we'll all be in danger, us and the Yatteran ships." Powell's mind whirled, formulating a plan even as he spoke. "Vita, can we use our tractor beams to manipulate the debris?" The Yatteran scientist's antennae twitched rapidly as she considered the possibility. "Yes, I believe so. The hybrid systems have significantly enhanced our tractor beam capabilities." "Good. Here's what we're going to do," Powell said, his voice filled with persistence. "We're going to use that debris to our advantage. Sarah, coordinate with Vita. I want you to create a barrier between Krell's ships and the path to our colony. Use the asteroids and space junk to block their advance." As his crew sprang into action, Powell received an incoming transmission from Krell's flagship. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, his features contorted with rage. "Powell," Krell spat, his voice filled with venom. "You think you've won? I'll see your colony burn to ash before I let that happen." Powell's eyes narrowed. "It's over, Krell. Surrender now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." But Krell's expression only grew more manic. "Never. All power to weapons. We'll take them all down with us if we have to." As the transmission cut off, Powell turned to Vita. "We need options. How can we neutralize that ship without destroying it?" Vita's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "The power distribution system. If we can exploit a weakness there, we might be able to shut them down completely." As Vita hurriedly explained her plan, Powell nodded, hope rising in his chest. They had a chance, a slim one, but a chance nonetheless. As he prepared to give the order, his communicator crackled to life. "Commander Powell," General Czar's voice came through, filled with urgency. "Our fleet is en route to your position. But be warned, a faction loyal to Krell is also mobilizing. You must purpose this quickly, or we risk a much larger conflict." Powell's teeth clenched as he absorbed this new information. The next few moments would determine not just the fate of the human colony, but the future of human-Yadrin relations. With a steadying breath, he turned to his crew, ready to give order that could change everything. "All right, people," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Let's make history." "Let's make history," Powell finished, his voice resolute. "Vita, Sarah, implement the plan. Everyone else, brace for potential turbulence." The crew sprang into action, their movements swift and precise. Powell watched the main view screen, his heart pounding as the gravitational anomalies intensified. Massive asteroids and debris hurtled towards their position, threatening to overwhelm the makeshift barrier they had created. "Commander," Sarah called out, her fingers flying across her console. "The barrier is destabilizing. We need to act fast." Powell nodded, his mind racing. "Recalibrate the tractor beams. Focus on creating a stable corridor through the debris field. We need an escape route if things go south." As the crew worked to establish the corridor, Vita approached Powell, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. "Commander, we've modified the energy weapons as discussed. The electromagnetic pulse is ready, but I must warn you, the interaction with the space-time distortion could have unforeseen consequences." "Understood," Powell replied, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "But we're out of options. Target Krell's flagship and fire when ready." The Stargazer's weapons powered up, emitting a low hum that reverberated through the ship. A burst of energy erupted from the vessel, striking Krell's flagship with unerring accuracy. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Krell's ship lurched violently, its lights flickering and dying as system after system failed. But as the crew of the Stargazer watched in amazement, a shimmering field of energy enveloped the disabled vessel. "Vita, what am I looking at?" Powell demanded, leaning forward in his chair. The Yadrin scientist's eyes widened as she analyzed the readings. It's a temporal distortion, Commander. The pulse has interacted with the residual space-time disruption, creating a localized field of temporal instability. Krell and his crew are effectively trapped in a bubble of slowed time. Powell's mind raced with the implications of this development. Before he could fully process the situation, Sarah interrupted with urgent news. "Sir, the remaining Yadrin vessels are standing down. They're transmitting surrender signals and requesting instructions from General Zar." Seizing the moment, Powell stood and addressed his communications officer. "Open a channel to the Yadrin fleet. Wide broadcast." As the channel opened, Powell spoke with calm authority. "This is Commander John Powell of the Earth vessel Stargazer. You've witnessed the corruption of Admiral Krell and the power of our combined technologies. I propose we form a joint human-Yadrin task force to apprehend Krell and investigate the full extent of this conspiracy. Together, we can forge a new path of cooperation and understanding between our peoples." The bridge fell silent as they awaited a response. Suddenly, alarms blared and Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "Commander, 3 Yadrin battlecruisers just dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system. They're powering up weapons." Powell's expression resolute as he recognized the threat. It's the hardliners loyal to Krell. Vita, analysis of their capabilities? Vita's fingers danced across her console. They're heavily armed. Sir, each ship is capable of causing significant damage to both us and the colony. Our current forces are outmatched. Powell's mind whirled with potential strategies. His gaze fell on the shimmering temporal field surrounding Krell's ship, and an idea began to form. "Vita, is it possible to expand that temporal field? Use it as a weapon against the approaching ships?" The Yadrin scientist's antennae twitched rapidly as she considered the possibility. "Theoretically, yes. We could use the Stargazer's hybrid systems to amplify and direct the field. But, Commander, the risks are significant. We don't fully understand the nature of this phenomenon. It could have unforeseen consequences on the surrounding space, potentially endangering Allied ships or even the colony if it grows too large. As Powell weighed his options, his communicator crackled to life. "Commander Powell," came the urgent voice of Earth Space Command. "The defensive fleet is still hours away. The colony is vulnerable if your current strategy fails." The pressure of the moment greatly troubled on Powell's shoulders. The hardliner fleet, led by the notorious Commander Vex, drew ever closer. Time was running out. Powell took a deep breath, his decision made. "Vita, begin preparations to expand the temporal field. Sarah, coordinate with the surrendered Yadrin ships. I want them to form a defensive perimeter around the colony. Weapons, stand by for potential engagement with Vex fleet." As his crew scrambled to execute his orders, Powell opened a channel to the approaching hardliners. "This is Commander Powell to the Yadrin fleet. Stand down immediately. We have neutralized Admiral Krell and exposed his corruption. Any hostile action will be met with force." Commander Vex's face appeared on the console, his features twisted with rage. "Your lies will not deceive us, human. Prepare to be destroyed." Powell cut the transmission, his expression grim. "Vita, status on the temporal field expansion?" "Ready on your command, sir," Vita replied, her voice tense. Powell nodded, fully aware of the magnitude of his next order. "Do it." The Stargazer's hybrid system surged with power, channeling energy into the shimmering temporal distortion. The field began to expand, reaching out towards Vex's approaching fleet like tendrils of shimmering light. As the temporal wave washed over the lead ship, its movement seemed to slow, as if moving through thick syrup. The effect spread to the other vessels, enveloping them in the time-altering phenomenon. Powell watched intently, knowing that the next few moments would determine the fate of not just this battle, but potentially the future of human-Yadrin relations. The Stargazer system strained under the effort of maintaining the expanded field, alarms blaring as power fluctuations rippled through the ship. "Status report." Powell barked, gripping the arms of his chair as the ship shuddered beneath him. The ship groaned under the strain of the expanding temporal field. "Field expansion successful, Commander," Vita reported, her antennae twitching rapidly. "Vex lead ships are entering the outer edges now." Powell leaned forward, eyes fixed on the main view screen. The approaching Yadrin vessels seemed to slow, their movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated as they entered the temporal distortion. "It's working," Sarah breathed, a note of relief in her voice. But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared across the bridge as new anomalies began to form. "Commander," Vita called out, her voice tinged with urgency. "The gravitational anomalies are interacting with the expanded field. We're seeing the formation of extreme temporal distortion pockets." Powell watched in astonishment as swirling vortexes of warped space-time materialized around them, creating a treacherous obstacle course for both friend and foe. "Adaptive thinking, people," Powell ordered, his mind racing. "Vita, can we use our tractor beams to manipulate the nearby debris into these vortexes?" The Yadrin scientist's eyes widened with understanding. "Yes, Commander. The extreme time dilation within the vortexes should effectively freeze the debris in place." "Do it," Powell commanded. "Create a maze of obstacles. Let's see Vex navigate through that." As the crew worked to implement this new strategy, a massive signature appeared on their long-range scanners. "Sir," Sarah reported, "a Yadrin diplomatic vessel just dropped out of FTL at the system's edge. It's High Counselor Jun's ship." Powell's eyebrows shot up. The arrival of the most senior member of the Yadrin High Council added a new layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. "Open a channel," Powell ordered, straightening his uniform. "We need to seize this opportunity for a diplomatic resolution." As the communications officer worked to establish a connection, Commander Vex's face appeared on a secondary screen, his features contorted with rage. "Powell," he snarled, "your tricks won't save you. All ships, maximum power to weapons, will overload their field and crush them." Powell watched in horror as Vex's fleet opened fire, their energy weapons lancing out towards the temple field. The beams slowed as they entered the distortion, creating a web of suspended destruction stretching between the ships. "Evasive maneuvers," Powell shouted. "We can't let those beams touch us." The Stargazer lurched as it dodged the frozen strands of energy, each one capable of tearing the ship apart on contact. In that moment, Powell made a bold decision. "Helm, take us closer to Krell's flagship. Vita, prepare to create a stable bubble within the field. We're going to extend our shields around Krell's ship and take him into custody." The crew looked at him with a mixture of shock and admiration, but quickly set to work. The Stargazer inched closer to the disabled vessel, the hybrid systems straining to maintain stability within the chaotic temporal disturbance. As they maneuvered into position, a transmission came through from High Counselor Zhun's ship. The aged Yadarin's face appeared on screen, his expression grave. "Commander Powell," Jim began, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "I have reviewed the evidence you provided. In light of these revelations, I hereby denounce Admiral Krell's actions and order Commander Vex to stand down immediately." The High Counselor's gaze shifted, addressing the entire system. "Furthermore, I commend Commander Powell and the crew of the Stargazer for their efforts to prevent an unjust attack on the human colony. Let this be a new chapter in human-Yadarin relations, one of cooperation and understanding." Powell allowed himself a small smile as he watched confusion spread through Vex's fleet. Some ships powered down their weapons, while others hesitated, caught between conflicting loyalties. "Now's our chance," Powell said, turning to his crew. "Extend shields around Krell's ship. Let's end this." The Stargazer systems groaned under the immense strain as they projected their shields around the disabled flagship. Alarms blared across the bridge, warning of imminent system failures. "Shield extension successful," Vita reported, her fingers dancing across her console as she fought to maintain stability. "But Commander, we can't hold this for long. The temple field is destabilizing." Powell gripped the arms of his chair, knowing the next few moments would determine the fate of not just this battle, but the future of human-Yadarin relations. The captured Krell, the hesitating Vex, the watchful eye of High Counselor Jin, all hung in the balance as the Stargazer systems reached their breaking point. "Hold steady," Powell urged his crew, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "We're not done yet." Yet, Powell's words were barely audible over the cacophony of alarms blaring throughout the bridge. The Stargazer shuddered violently, its systems straining under the immense pressure of maintaining the temple field and extended shields. "Commander," Vita's voice was urgent, "the hybrid systems are overloading. We're losing stability in both the temple field and our shields." Powell's mind raced, assessing their options in a split second. "Shut down all non-essential systems," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Redirect every spare joule of power to the shields and temple field generators." The bridge dimmed as auxiliary lighting and life support systems powered down. The usual hum of the ship's myriad systems faded to an eerie quiet, punctuated only by the urgent beeping of critical alerts. "Sir," Sarah called out, her eyes fixed on her console, "Commander Vex's fleet is on the move. A portion of his ships have powered down, but Vex and a group of loyalists are pushing through the weapon fire grid." Powell watched as the rogue Yadarin ships navigated the frozen strands of energy with reckless dedication. "They're going to tear themselves apart," he muttered, then raised his voice. "Vita, what's happening to those ships?" The Yadarin scientist's antennae twitched rapidly as she analyzed the data. The temporal field is destabilizing, Commander. It's creating pockets of extreme time dilation. Vex ships are experiencing temporal shear. Different parts of each vessel are moving through time at different rates. As if to emphasize her point, one of Vex's frigates seemed to stretch and distort before their eyes, its hull groaning under the impossible stress before it shattered into a cloud of debris frozen in time. Powell made a snap decision. "Extend our shields around the surrendered Yatteran ships," he commanded. "We need to show them we're committed to protecting those who choose peace." The crew worked furiously to comply, and the Stargazers' already taxed systems groaned under the additional strain. The shimmering bubble of their shields expanded, enveloping several nearby Yatteran vessels. "Shields holding," reported the tactical officer. "But we're running on fumes, sir." Powell nodded grimly, then turned to Vita. "Is there any way we can stabilize this temporal mess?" Vita's fingers danced across her console as she ran simulations. "Potentially, Commander. If we release calculated bursts of energy from our hybrid systems, we might be able to create stable time corridors through the distortions." "Do it," Powell ordered without hesitation. As Vita implemented her plan, Powell's communicator crackled to life. "Commander Powell," came the authoritative voice of High Counselor Jin. "I've observed your actions here today. Your tactical acumen and commitment to peace are commendable. I hereby deputize you as a temporary Yatteran peace officer, granting you full authority to apprehend Admiral Krell and deal with Vex insurrection." Powell straightened, the weight of this new responsibility settling on his shoulders. "Thank you, High Counselor. I'll do my best to bring this conflict to a peaceful resolution." With his newfound authority, Powell opened a channel to Vex fleet. "This is Commander Powell, acting under the authority of High Counselor Jun. Commander Vex, I order you and your loyalists to stand down immediately. We're creating safe passages through the temporal distortions. Comply now, and you'll be granted safe passage. Refuse, and you'll be left to navigate these anomalies on your own." As he awaited a response, new alarms blared across the bridge. "Commander," called out the science officer, "we're detecting temporal irregularities on the colony's surface. The distortions are affecting the planet." Powell's blood ran cold as he realized the full scope of the danger they faced. They needed to neutralize the temporal field quickly, or the consequences for the colony could be catastrophic. "Vita," he called out, "we need options to collapse this field safely." The Yatteran scientist conferred quickly with her human counterparts. Their combined expertise focused on solving this unprecedented problem. After a tense moment, Vita looked up. "We have a potential solution, Commander," she reported. "We can use the Stargazer's hybrid technology to generate an inverse temporal wave. It should cancel out the existing distortions and collapse the field." "What's the catch?" Powell asked, sensing there had to be one. Vita's antennae drooped slightly. "We'll need to drop our shields completely. The energy requirements are too high to maintain both systems." Powell's heart made as he weighed the options. Dropping their shields would leave them vulnerable to Vex loyalists, but failing to act could doom the colony to a temporal catastrophe. As he prepared to give the order, a new transmission cut through the comm channels. Admiral Krell's face appeared on the main view screen, his features contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation. "This is Admiral Krell to all Yatteran ships," he began, his voice strained. "The corruption in our ranks goes deeper than you know. High Command is compromised. Officials we've trusted for years have been working against the interests of our people." The bridge fell silent as Krell's words sank in. Powell watched as confusion spread across the faces of the Yatteran crew members, their loyalties visibly shaken. "Sir," Sarah reported, her voice hushed, "we're detecting signs of division among Vex's remaining ships. Some are powering down their weapons." Powell knew this was their moment. He had to act now, before the situation spiraled even further out of control. With a deep breath, he gave the order that would determine the fate of everyone in the system. Vita, begin generating the inverse temporal wave. All hands, brace for impact. We're about to end this. As the Stargazer systems hummed to life, channeling every last bit of power into the hybrid generators, Powell gripped the arms of his chair. The next few moments would shape the course of human-Yatran relations for generations to come, and he could only hope he'd made the right choice. The bridge of the Stargazer fell silent as Powell's order rang out. The crew exchanged tense glances, fully aware of the risk they were about to undertake. Powell's eyes remained fixed on the main view screen, watching as the chaotic temporal distortions swirled around them. Initiating inverse temporal wave, Vita announced, her fingers flying across her console. Shields dropping. Now. The familiar hum of the Stargazer's shields faded away, leaving the crew feeling exposed and vulnerable. Powell felt a chill run down his spine as he watched Vex loyalist ships approach on the tactical display. All power to the hybrid systems, Powell commanded. Let's end this temporal nightmare. The deck plates beneath their feet began to vibrate as the Stargazer's hybrid technology roared to life. Outside the viewports, space itself seemed to ripple and distort as the inverse temporal wave began to propagate outward. Sir, Sarah called out, her voice tight with tension. Vex ships are launching an attack. Powell watched as energy beams lanced out from the enemy vessels, their trajectories warping and bending as they interacted with the collapsing temporal field. Some shots seemed to freeze mid-flight, while others accelerated to near-instantaneous impact. Evasive maneuvers, Powell shouted. Vita, status on the temporal wave? Expanding steadily, Commander, Vita reported. The distortions are beginning to cancel out, but the strain on our systems is immense. Powell's mind raced, searching for a way to defend his vulnerable ships. His eyes fell on the frozen strands of weapon fire still suspended in space from the earlier battle. Tactical, lock tractor beams on those suspended energy weapons, he ordered. Use them as a defensive barrier around our allied ships. The tactical officer's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly complied. The Stargazer's tractor beams engaged, carefully manipulating the frozen energy beams to create a protective net around their allies. As the inverse temporal wave expanded, the space around them became a maelstrom of conflicting time streams. Powell watched in awe as sections of Vex ships seemed to stretch and distort, different parts moving at different speeds through time. Commander, the communications officer called out, we're receiving multiple distress calls from Vex fleet. Some of his crew are refusing orders, fearing their ships will tear apart. Powell nodded grimly. Open a channel to all Yatran vessels. As soon as the channel was open, Powell spoke with clear authority. This is Commander Powell. The temporal distortions are collapsing. Stand down immediately and power down your weapons, or risk destruction. We offer safe passage to all who surrender. No sooner had he finished speaking than alarms blared across the bridge. Critical system failure, the computer announced dispassionately. Artificial gravity failing. Life support systems compromised. The bridge tilted suddenly as the gravity fluctuated, sending crew members scrambling to hold onto their stations. Powell gripped his chair tightly, fighting against the disorientation. Reroute all available power to life support and essential systems, he ordered, his voice strained. We need to hold on just a little longer. Through the view screen, Powell saw a massive shape emerge from the swirling chaos of the temporal distortions. A Yatran warship, easily dwarfing the Stargazer, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Sir, Sarah reported, her eyes wide, that's the stalwart defender. Admiral Thora's flagship. Before Powell could respond, a new voice cut through the communications channel. This is Admiral Thora of the Stalwart Defender to all vessels in this system. I am here to support Commander Powell's peacekeeping efforts. Commander Vex, you are ordered to stand down immediately and surrender your vessels. Powell felt a surge of relief at the arrival of this unexpected ally. However, his reprieve was short-lived as a violent shudder ran through the Stargazer. "Commander," the helm officer called out, panic edging into his voice, "we're caught in the gravitational pull of the gas giant. Our engines are offline. We're drifting." Powell's mind raced as he assessed their dire situation. The Stargazer was rapidly losing power, drifting towards certain destruction in the gas giant's crushing atmosphere. Vex's remaining loyalists were still a threat, despite Admiral Thor's arrival. And the Temple Wave, while stabilizing much of the surrounding space, had yet to fully neutralize the anomalies threatening the human colony. As klaxons blared and warning lights flashed across the bridge, Powell knew he had mere moments to make a decision that would determine not only the fate of his crew, but the future of human-Yadran relations. He took a deep breath, steadying himself against the erratic gravity, and prepared to give the order that would shape the course of the battle, and perhaps galactic history, for years to come. To come, with the fate of his crew, the mission, and potentially galactic peace hanging in the balance, Powell made his decision. "All non-essential personnel, prepare for immediate evacuation," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Transfer to the nearest allied Yadran vessels. Skeleton crew, remain at your stations." As crew members rushed to comply, Powell turned to Vita. "We need to buy ourselves more time. Can we create a localized temporal bubble using what's left of our hybrid systems?" Vita's antennae twitched as she quickly ran calculations. "Theoretically, yes, but it's never been attempted on this scale before. The strain on our systems will be immense." "Do it," Powell commanded. "We need every second we can get." As the evacuation proceeded, Powell and his remaining crew worked feverishly to implement their desperate plan. The ship groaned and shuddered around them, the pull of the gas giant growing stronger with each passing moment. Suddenly, a new voice crackled over the comm system. "Stargazer, this is Admiral Thora of the Stalwart Defender. We're dispatching rescue shuttles to your position. Hold on." Powell allowed himself a moment of relief before refocusing on the task at hand. "Acknowledge, Admiral. We're attempting to create a temporal bubble to slow our descent. Be advised, approach may be difficult due to lingering temporal distortions." As Vita activated the temporal bubble, the bridge of the Stargazer seemed to shimmer and warp. Powell felt a strange sensation, as if the very air around him had thickened. Outside the viewports, the swirling atmosphere of the gas giant appeared to slow its chaotic dance. "Temporal bubble stable, Commander," Vita reported. "We've slowed our temporal progression by a factor of 60. Each minute outside the bubble will give us an hour to work." Powell nodded grimly. "Let's make every second count. Reroute all available power to propulsion and shields. We need to break free of this gravitational pull." As the skeleton crew worked frantically to repair critical systems, Powell's attention was drawn to a flashing alert on his tactical display. Admiral Krell's captured flagship was showing signs of increased activity. "Sir," Sarah called out, her voice tense, "Krell's trying to regain control of his ship. He's breaking free of our hold." Before Powell could respond, another alarm blared. "Commander," the tactical officer reported, "Vex's remaining ships are on an intercept course. They're attempting to ram us." Powell's mind raced, assessing the multiple threats converging on his vulnerable ship. He opened a channel to Admiral Thora. "Admiral, be advised. Vex forces are making a final push. We need immediate assistance." "Understood, Commander," Thora replied, her voice calm but determined. "Diverting forces to intercept. Hold your position." As Thora's ships moved to engage Vex's suicidal charge, Powell focused on the immediate problem of keeping the Stargazer from plummeting into the gas giant. An idea struck him as he watched the frozen strands of weapons fire still suspended in space around them. "Tactical, lock tractor beams on those suspended energy weapons," he ordered. "Pull them towards us through the temporal bubble." The officer complied, confusion evident in his voice. "Sir, what are you planning?" "We're going to use them as a power source," Powell explained, his eyes fixed on the approaching energy beams. "The temporal dilation should slow their approach enough for us to harness their energy." As the frozen weapons fire entered the Stargazer's temporal bubble, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The ship's power levels surged, systems overloading and recalibrating in rapid succession. "Power levels critical," the engineering officer shouted. "We're experiencing cascading energy conversions across all systems." Powell gripped his chair tightly as the ship bucked and shuddered around him. "Direct the excess energy to propulsion and shields. We need to break free of this gravity well." As the Stargazer's systems fluctuated wildly, pulses of temporal energy radiated outward from the ship. These pulses interacted with the surrounding space, temporarily stabilizing the lingering anomalies and creating a series of temporal corridors. Admiral Thora's voice came through the comm once more. "Commander Powell, we're detecting stable pathways through the distortions. Commencing rescue operation now." Powell watched on the tactical display as Thora's forces formed a chain of ships, linking tractor beams from the stalwart Defender through the rescue shuttles to the Stargazer. The coordinated effort began to slow their descent, but the strain on all ships involved was evident. Just as it seemed they might break free, a new threat emerged. The gas giant's powerful magnetic field began to interact with the temporal energies surrounding the Stargazer and the rescue ships, creating a swirling vortex of magnetized plasma. "Commander," Vita called out, her voice urgent, "the magnetic field is destabilizing our temporal bubble. We need to act now." Powell surveyed the situation, knowing that his next decision would determine the fate of not just his ship, but potentially the entire mission. The Stargazer systems were supercharged, but for how long? He could attempt to break free, potentially saving his ship but leaving the rescue vessels vulnerable. Or he could try to extend the temporal bubble to protect all ships involved, risking a complete burnout of the Stargazer systems. As klaxons blared and warning lights flashed across the bridge, Powell steeled himself for the choice that would shape the course of the battle and perhaps galactic history itself. Powell's gaze swept across the chaotic bridge, his mind racing through their limited options. The fate of his crew, the mission, and potentially galactic peace hung in the balance. With unwavering tenacity, he made his decision. "Vita, prepare to extend our temporal bubble," Powell ordered, his voice steady despite the tumult surrounding them. "We're going to protect all the ships involved in this rescue operation." Vita's antennae twitched in surprise. "Commander, the strain on our systems will be catastrophic. The Stargazer may not survive." "Understood," Powell replied, his eyes hardened. "But we're not leaving anyone behind. Initiate the expansion." As Vita's fingers flew across her console, the ship groaned in protest. The temporal bubble slowly expanded, enveloping Admiral Thora's rescue shuttles and the chain of ships linked by tractor beams. The Stargazer shuddered violently, its hull creaking under the immense stress. "Temporal bubble stable," Vita reported, her voice strained. "But our power core is approaching critical levels." Powell nodded grimly. "Reroute all non-essential power to maintain the bubble's integrity. We need to buy as much time as possible for the evacuation." As the skeleton crew worked frantically to keep the ship functional, a new alert flashed on the tactical display. Sarah's eyes widened as she processed the information. "Commander, Krell's flagship is breaking free," she exclaimed. "He's overridden the damaged systems and is attempting to escape." Powell's lips tightened into a thin line. Alert Admiral Thora. We can't let him get away with that evidence. Before anyone could act on Powell's order, another development caught their attention. Commander Vek's remaining loyal ships suddenly changed course, abandoning their charge against the Stargazer to pursue Krell's fleeing vessel. Well, that's an unexpected turn of events, Powell muttered, watching the tactical display with a mixture of surprise and cautious optimism. The bridge rocked violently as another system failure cascaded through the ship. Warning klaxons blared, their urgent wail adding to the cacophony of creaking metal and overloading circuits. Hull integrity failing in multiple sections, the engineering officer shouted over the din. Life support systems are fluctuating. Powell knew they were out of time. With a heavy heart, he gave the order he had hoped to avoid. All remaining crew evacuate to the rescue shuttles immediately. That's an order. As his crew rushed to comply, Powell remained at his station, determined to maintain the temporal bubble for as long as possible. To his surprise, Vita stood firm beside him. "I'm staying, Commander," she stated, her tone brooking no argument. "My expertise with the hybrid systems may be our only chance to maximize our survival." Powell nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "Let's give them hell, Vita." Together, they worked in seamless coordination, adjusting power allocations and compensating for system failures. Outside the viewports, the swirling vortex of magnetized plasma continued its relentless assault on the ship. Suddenly, a new energy signature appeared on their sensors. Powell's eyes narrowed as he analyzed the reading. "It's coming from the colony," Vita observed. "They've activated some kind of long-range tractor beam." As they watched, the beam's energy interacted with their temporal bubble and the surrounding plasma, creating a corridor of relatively calm space extending from the planet's surface. "Incoming transmission from the stalwart defender," the calm officer announced. Admiral Thora's voice filled the bridge, clear and determined. "Commander Powell, we're repositioning to take advantage of this energy corridor. Hold your position." Powell watched as the massive Yatteran flagship maneuvered through the turbulent space, using the corridor as a guide. As the stalwart defender drew closer, the strain on the Stargazer's systems eased slightly. "They've strengthened the tractor beam link," Vita reported, a note of hope in her voice. "It's relieving some of the pressure on our systems." Their momentary relief was short-lived. The volatile interaction between the temporal bubble, the plasma vortex, and the colony's tractor beam began to create unpredictable temporal eddies. Objects and energy fields around them phased in and out of sync with normal space-time. "Vita, we need to adjust for these temporal fluctuations," Powell called out, his hands flying over his console. "Recalibrate the bubble's frequency to match the eddies." As they worked to stabilize their precarious situation, the chase between Vek's ships and Krell's vessel intensified. The erratic movements of the pursuing and fleeing ships threatened to collide with the delicate formation of Powell's allies. "Commander," Vita's voice was tense, "we can't maintain this bubble indefinitely. The power core is on the verge of collapse." Powell's mind raced, searching for a solution that would save his ship, maintain the protective bubble, and ensure Krell's capture. The next few moments would be crucial, not just for their survival, but for the future of human-Yatteran relations. His eyes locked onto the swirling temporal eddy surrounding them, and a daring plan began to form. It was risky, potentially catastrophic, but it might be their only chance. "Vita," Powell said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them, "I need you to calculate the pattern of these temporal eddies. We're going to ride them out of here." "This turbulent space," Powell explained, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "If we time it right, we can use the eddies to propel us to safety." Vita's antennae twitched as she processed the audacious plan. "It's risky, Commander, but it might be our only option. I'll start the calculations immediately." As Vita's fingers danced across her console, The ship groaned ominously. Microfractures began to appear in the hull, creating an eerie symphony of creaks and pops that echoed through the bridge. Hull integrity down to 47%, the engineering officer reported, his voice strained. We're losing life support in Section C through F. Powell nodded grimly. Reroute power from those sections to reinforce the temporal bubble. We need to buy more time. As the Stargazer's crew fought to keep their ship intact, Admiral Thora made a bold decision aboard the stalwart defender. She keyed her comm, her voice resolute as she addressed her bridge crew. Move us closer to the Stargazer, she ordered. We'll use our shielding to provide additional protection. Her first officer's eyes widened. Admiral, that could put our own ship at risk. Thora's gaze remained steady. Sometimes, we must take risks to forge trust. Proceed with the maneuver. The massive Yadrin flagship inched closer to the battered Stargazer, its advanced shielding extending to encompass the human vessel. The strain on the Stargazer systems immediately lessened, but the danger was a long way to go. Suddenly, a series of energy bursts lit up the space around them. Commander Vex's loyalist ships had caught up with Krell's fleeing vessel and opened fire, intent on disabling the corrupt Admiral's engines. Incoming weapons fire, Sarah shouted, her hands flying over her tactical display. Powell watched in horror as the energy beams interacted with the temporal eddies, creating unpredictable surges that rippled through space. The rescue fleet rocked violently as the energy waves washed over them. Vita, Powell called out, an idea forming in his mind. Can we recalibrate our sensor array to detect these temporal energy patterns? Vita's eyes lit up with understanding. Affirmative, Commander. It will take some creative programming, but I can make it work. As Vita worked on repurposing the sensors, Powell opened a channel to Admiral Thora. Admiral, we're working on a way to predict these temporal surges. Stand by for data transmission. Understood, Commander, Thora replied. We'll integrate the data into our navigation systems. The bridge of the Stargazer became a flurry of activity as the crew worked to implement Powell's improvised plan. Vita's makeshift temporal energy detector began to map out the patterns of the eddies, providing crucial information to the rescue fleet. Just as they seemed to be making progress, a new alarm blared through the ship. The engineering officer's face paled as he read the incoming data. Commander, the power core is showing signs of an imminent breach, he reported, his voice shaking. If it goes, it'll take us and half the rescue fleet with it. Powell's mind raced, weighing their limited options. The risk was enormous, but a daring plan began to take shape. He turned to Vita, his expression grim but determined. Vita, I need you to calculate the exact amount of power we'd need to create a controlled overload, he said. We're going to use our failing core as a weapon. Vita's antennae stood straight up in shock. Commander, that's incredibly dangerous. The timing would have to be perfect. I know, Powell replied, but if we can create a temporal shockwave, we might be able to disable Vex and Krell while propelling ourselves to safety. As Vita began the complex calculations, Powell contacted Admiral Thora once more. Admiral, I have a plan, but I'll need the stalwart defender's computer systems to make it work. Thora listened intently as Powell outlined his audacious attempt. Her expression was one of concern, but also grudging admiration for the human commander's ingenuity. It's a bold plan, Commander, she said finally. We'll do everything we can to assist. As the Yadrin and human crews worked together to prepare for the risky maneuver, the situation with Krell and Vex reached a boiling point. Vex ships finally managed to land a crippling blow on Krell's engines, sending the corrupt Admiral's vessel spiraling towards the plasma vortex. Powell watched the tactical display with growing alarm as Krell's ship began to emit a new energy signature. He's activated his self-destruct sequence, Powell realized aloud. We're out of time. The bridge erupted into frenzied activity as Powell issued rapid-fire orders. "Begin evacuation of all remaining crew to the rescue shuttles," he commanded. "Vita and I will stay behind to ensure the plan's success." As the last of the crew reluctantly abandoned ship, Admiral Thora's voice came through the comm once more. "Commander Powell, we're attempting a long-distance power transfer to stabilize your core. It's never been done before, but it might buy you the time you need for a full evacuation." Powell felt a surge of gratitude for the Yadran Admiral's efforts. "Thank you, Admiral. We'll make every second count." As the power transfer began, the space around the ships became a maelstrom of temporal chaos. Energy beams phased in and out of existence, and pockets of accelerated and decelerated time formed and dissipated in the blink of an eye. Powell and Vita worked feverishly, their hands flying over their consoles as they fought to integrate the incoming power and stabilize the Stargazer's failing systems. The ship bucked and shuddered around them, threatening to tear itself apart at any moment. "Power core stabilizing," Vita reported, her voice tense. "But I don't know how long it will hold." Powell nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Krell's ship was moments away from detonation, and Vex forces were closing in fast. The next few seconds would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Yadran relations. "Prepare to initiate the temporal shockwave on my mark," Powell ordered, his finger hovering over the final command. He took a deep breath, knowing that everything hinged on this moment. His finger descended on the command interface, initiating the temporal shockwave. But as the energy began to build, something unexpected happened. The incoming power from the stalwart defender interacted with the Stargazer's systems in a way neither Powell nor Vita had anticipated. Instead of creating a destructive shockwave, the energy signature began to stabilize the surrounding temporal eddies. "Commander, look!" Vita exclaimed, her antennae vibrating with excitement. "The temporal fluctuations are normalizing." Powell's eyes widened as he watched the tactical display. A bubble of stabilized space-time was expanding outward from their position, encompassing the rescue fleet and pushing back the chaotic energies that had threatened to tear them apart. Admiral Thora's voice crackled over the comm. "Commander Powell, we're detecting a stabilization effect. We're going to take advantage of this. Prepare for emergency maneuvers." Before Powell could respond, he felt the ship lurch as the stalwart defender's shields extended to envelop the Stargazer. Simultaneously, the powerful tractor beams of the Yadran flagship engaged, pulling the human vessel away from the gas giant's gravitational well. "Hull integrity holding at 32%, the engineering officer reported, his voice strained but hopeful. "The Yadran shields are taking most of the strain." As the rescue fleet worked in concert to stabilize their position, Powell's attention was drawn to the ongoing chase between Commander Vex and Admiral Krell. Vex ships had finally managed to land a crippling blow on Krell's engines, leaving the corrupt Admiral's vessel drifting helplessly towards the plasma vortex. "Vita, can you get a reading on Krell's ship?" Powell asked, his mind racing with possibilities. Vita's fingers danced across her console. "Affirmative, Commander. I'm detecting an active self-destruct sequence. Estimated time to detonation, 3 minutes and counting." Powell's mind focused as he assessed their options. They couldn't let Krell escape justice, but attempting a boarding action in these conditions would be suicide. Suddenly, an idea struck him. "Vita, what if we use our remaining functional systems to create a targeted energy pulse?" Powell proposed, his eyes alight with commitment. "If we combine it with the properties of this stabilized temporal bubble, we might be able to create a localized time dilation field around Krell's ship." Vita's antennae twitched as she processed the idea. "Theoretically possible, Commander, but we need additional power to create a field strong enough to pause the self-destruct sequence." As if in answer to their dilemma, a new energy signature appeared on their sensors. Governor Marcus Taylor's voice came through the comm system, clear and resolute. "Commander Powell, we've redirected our long-range tractor beam to support your plan," the governor announced. "We'll reinforce the time dilation field from here." With renewed hope, Powell and Vita began the complex calculations needed to execute their daring plan. But as they worked, a new threat emerged. The gas giant's turbulent atmosphere, agitated by the recent electromagnetic activity, began to emit massive solar flares. "Solar flares incoming," Sarah shouted from her station. "They'll disrupt our stabilization effect and could ignite the plasma vortex." Powell made a split-second decision. "Vita, divert all remaining power from life support to the deflector array. We need to create an electromagnetic shield to deflect those flares." Vita hesitated for a fraction of a second, her eyes meeting Powell's. They both knew what this meant. They would have only minutes of breathable air left. But the alternative was unthinkable. Vita nodded and executed the command. As the Stargazer's life support systems shut down, Powell felt the air grow thin. He pushed aside the discomfort, focusing on the task at hand. The deflector array hummed to life, creating a shimmering barrier that redirected the incoming solar flares away from the rescue fleet and Krell's ship. Admiral Thora's voice came through once more, filled with urgency. "Commander, we're launching a joint strike team to board Krell's vessel once the time dilation field is established. Stand by to initiate the energy pulse." Powell watched as a reinforced shuttle launched from the stalwart Defender, carrying a mixed team of human and Yadran operatives. He took a deep breath of the thinning air, steeling himself for what came next. "Initiating energy pulse now," Powell announced, his finger pressing the final command. A brilliant beam of energy shot forth from the Stargazer, amplified by the colony's tractor beam and the stalwart Defender's shields. It streaked across space, impacting Krell's ship with a flash of blinding light. As the glare faded, a shimmering bubble of slowed time enveloped the vessel, freezing the self-destruct sequence in its tracks. The strike team's shuttle darted forward, taking advantage of the temporal pause to dock with Krell's ship. Powell and Vita watched anxiously as the boarding action commenced, their own situation growing more precarious by the second. Suddenly, Commander Vek's ships began to move, but instead of retreating, they formed a defensive perimeter around Krell's vessel, shielding it from the surrounding disturbances. "Look at that," Vita murmured, her voice weak from the lack of oxygen. "Vex is protecting the evidence." Powell nodded, his vision starting to blur. The Stargazer groaned around them, its systems failing one by one. Through the haze of his dimming consciousness, Powell heard Admiral Thora's voice, urgent and concerned. "Commander Powell, we're detecting critical life support failure on the Stargazer. Initiating emergency extraction. Stand by for matter transportation." Powell's last coherent thought was of Vita. With the remnants of his strength, he activated the maneuvering thrusters, pushing his Yadran colleague towards the stalwart Defender. The action sent him drifting in the opposite direction, towards the looming plasma vortex. As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, Powell saw a shimmering light envelop Vita. She vanished, safely transported aboard the Yadran flagship. He allowed himself a small smile, even as he felt the heat of the plasma vortex growing stronger. The remains of the Stargazer disintegrated around him, leaving Powell floating in the vastness of space. The rescue team's frantic attempts to lock onto his life signs grew more desperate as he drifted further away. In the distance, he could see the strike team securing Krell's ship, Vex forces maintaining their protective formation, and the stalwart Defender's shield straining against the turbulent space. As consciousness began to slip away, Powell found himself at the center of a cosmic maelstrom. The fate of the mission, the future of human-Yadran relations, and his very survival all hung in the balance. The universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how these converging crises would perseverance. In that moment of suspended animation, Powell's thoughts turned to the incredible journey that had brought him here, to the edge of the unknown. Whatever happened next, he knew that the actions taken here, in this tumultuous pocket of space, would reverberate across both their civilizations for years to come. Come, as his vision darkened, Powell's last conscious thought was a fervent hope that his actions had made a difference. Aboard the stalwart defender, Admiral Thora's eyes were fixed on the tactical display, watching Powell's life signs grow weaker by the second. She turned to her crew, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to get him out of there now. Chief Engineer Cora, report to the bridge immediately." Within moments, a lithe Yadaran female with vibrant blue skin rushed onto the bridge, her multifaceted eyes taking in the situation at a glance. "Admiral, I have an idea," Cora said, her fingers already dancing across a nearby console. "We can modify our matter transportation field to compensate for the temporal distortions." As Cora's team worked feverishly to implement their daring plan, the strike team aboard Krell's vessel made their move. Commander Axel, a grizzled human veteran with a cybernetic eye, led the charge onto the bridge. His team moved with practiced efficiency, neutralizing Krell's remaining loyal crew members in a series of swift, non-lethal takedowns. Axel approached the corrupt admiral, who sat defiantly in his command chair. "Admiral Krell, you're under arrest for crimes against both our species," Axel declared, his voice cold and professional. As Krell was secured, Axel's second-in-command called out from a nearby console. "Commander, we've found something. There's a hidden data core with extensive records of corruption within the Yadaran High Command." Outside, Commander Vex faced a new challenge. The solar flares from the gas giant intensified, threatening to overwhelm his ship's shields. Vex's voice crackled over the comm system, tense but controlled. "All ships, initiate shield rotation protocol. We need to buy time for the strike team and keep Krell's vessel secure." On the human colony, Governor Marcus Taylor and his team worked tirelessly to boost the power of their experimental long-range tractor beam. The colony's power grid hummed with increased activity as they tapped into the geothermal generators deep beneath the surface. "We're channeling power from the geothermal grid now," Taylor reported, his voice strained but determined. Beam strength increasing by 200%, 300%, 400%. The enhanced beam lanced out across space, providing crucial support to stabilize the time dilation field around Krell's ship and assist in deflecting the intensifying solar flares. Aboard the stalwart defender, Chief Engineer Cora's modifications to the matter transportation system were complete. "Admiral, we're ready to attempt transport," she announced, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. Thora nodded grimly. "Do it." The first attempt failed, Powell's signals scattered by the temporal distortions. Cora's hands flew across her console, recalibrating the system with lightning speed, using the colony's tractor beam data to compensate for temporal fluctuations. Initiating second attempt now. As the transportation system powered up once more, the stalwart defender systems strained under the immense power draw. Lights flickered throughout the ship, and non-essential systems temporarily shut down. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a brilliant flash of light, Powell materialized on the transportation pad. His form flickered for an instant before solidifying fully, his emergency suit cracked and venting atmosphere. Medical teams rushed forward, quickly moving Powell to the ship's advanced medical bay. As they worked to stabilize him, Admiral Thora turned her attention to the tactical situation. "All ships, initiate immediate withdrawal from the danger zone," she ordered. "Set course for the nearest safe coordinates." As the fleet began to move away from the turbulent region, the space behind them erupted in a spectacular display of energy. A massive shockwave formed, propelling the vessels further from danger. In the midst of their retreat, a new communication channel opened. Commander Vex's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression a mixture of resignation and relief. Admiral Thora, I hereby surrender my remaining forces and request political asylum, Vex stated formally. I am prepared to testify against the corruption within our high command. Thora's eyes narrowed as she considered the request. After a moment, she nodded. Your surrender is accepted, Commander Vex. We will grant you temporary asylum pending further investigation. As the immediate crisis passed, the fleet established contact with the human colony. Governor Taylor's face appeared on the display, looking haggard but relieved. Admiral Thora, we have experienced some disruptions due to the temporal anomalies, but I'm pleased to report no casualties, Taylor said. We stand ready to assist in any way we can. I request a full debriefing on the situation as soon as possible. Thora acknowledged the governor's offer with a grateful nod. Thank you, Governor. We'll arrange a secure channel for a full briefing once we've reached a safe distance. As the fleet continued its journey to the nearest major Yadran outpost, the implications of their discovery began to sink in. The data core retrieved from Krell's ship promised to expose a vast conspiracy that reached the highest levels of Yadran government. In the medical bay, Powell slowly regained consciousness. As his eyes fluttered open, he found himself looking up at the concerned face of Admiral Thora. Welcome back, Commander, she said, a hint of warmth in her usually stern voice. It seems we have quite a situation on our hands. Powell attempted to sit up, wincing at the pain that shot through his body. Admiral, he croaked, his voice hoarse from his ordeal. The mission? Did we succeed? Thora's expression grew serious. We did, Commander, but I'm afraid our work is just the beginning. The evidence we've uncovered, it changes everything. As Powell listened to Thora's brief summary of events, his mind raced with the potential consequences. The exposure of such widespread corruption within the Yadran High Command would undoubtedly have far-reaching effects on both their civilizations. We're en route to the nearest major Yadran outpost, Thora continued. Once there, we'll need to present our evidence and begin addressing the fallout. I expect we'll both have significant roles to play in the coming days. Powell nodded, his perseverance evident despite his weakened state. As he prepared himself for the challenges ahead, he couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The future of human-Yadran relations hung in the balance, and the decisions made in the coming days would shape the course of interstellar history. History in the making, Powell murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Thora nodded gravely. Indeed, Commander. But first, we need to ensure your recovery. Dr. Lyra will be overseeing your treatment. As if on cue, a slender Yadran with iridescent scales entered the medical bay. Dr. Lyra's multifaceted eyes scanned Powell's vitals on the nearby monitor before turning to address him directly. Commander Powell, I'm Dr. Lyra. Your condition is critical, but stable for now. We're approaching Nexus Prime, where we'll have access to more advanced medical facilities. Powell attempted to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back down. How long until we reach the outpost? He asked, fighting to keep his eyes open. Before Dr. Lyra could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Admiral Thora's comm device chirped urgently. She answered, her expression darkening as she listened to the report. It seems our arrival won't be as smooth as we hoped, Thora said, her voice tight with tension. A Yadran Defense Force blockade has been established around Nexus Prime. They're demanding we stand down and prepare to be boarded. Powell's eyes widened, adrenaline momentarily overriding his fatigue. They know about Krell, he said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Thora nodded grimly. It appears so. I need to return to the bridge immediately. Dr. Lyra, keep me updated on the commander's condition. As Thora strode out of the medical bay, Dr. Lyra began preparing various instruments and medications. Commander, I'm going to induce a medical coma to slow your body's degradation. It's our best option until we can access more advanced treatment. Powell wanted to protest, to insist on remaining conscious during this critical moment, but he knew the doctor was right. As the sedative entered his system, his last thought was of the uncertain future that awaited them all. On the bridge of the stalwart defender, Admiral Thora surveyed the tactical display with growing concern. The blockade around Nexus Prime was formidable, consisting of several heavily armed warships forming a tight perimeter. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the blockade commander, Captain Zorn. He's insisting we power down our weapons and prepare for boarding." Thora's mind raced, weighing her options. A direct confrontation could lead to unnecessary bloodshed and potentially jeopardize the evidence they'd obtained. Yet, surrendering was not an option, not with the fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance. After a moment of tense deliberation, Thora made her decision. "Open a wideband transmission channel," she ordered. "I want this broadcast to reach every ship in the vicinity, including civilian vessels docked at Nexus Prime." As her crew scrambled to comply, Thora composed herself, knowing that her next words could change the course of history. When the channel opened, she spoke with clear, unwavering authority. "This is Admiral Thora of the Stalwart Defender. To all ships and stations receiving this transmission, I come bearing evidence of a vast conspiracy within the highest levels of Yadaran government. Admiral Krell, recently apprehended, was found in possession of a data core containing irrefutable proof of widespread corruption." She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. "In the interest of transparency and justice, I am releasing a carefully vetted summary of this evidence to the public. I urge all citizens, both Yadaran and human, to examine this information and demand accountability from their leaders." As the transmission ended, the bridge erupted into a flurry of activity. Reports flooded in from across the fleet and beyond, indicating that the information was spreading rapidly through both official and unofficial channels. The tactical display flickered, showing movement among the blockade ships. Captain Zorn's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Admiral Thora," Zorn said, his voice strained. I don't understand. These orders came directly from High Command. But if what you're saying is true..." Thora leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Captain Zorn, I understand your position, but I implore you to consider the greater good. Allow us to dock at Nexus Prime and present our evidence through proper channels. The future of both our species may depend on it." As Zorn visibly struggled with his decision, a new voice cut through the tension on the bridge. "Admiral," Commander Vex said, stepping forward, "I have a proposal." Thora turned to face the Yadaran officer, her antenna twitching with curiosity. "Speak, Commander." "I can lead a small team to infiltrate Nexus Prime," Vex explained. "My knowledge of Yadaran security protocols and my status as a known loyalist will allow us to move freely within the station. We can gather intelligence on the extent of the corruption's reach and potentially access the central communication hub." Thora's eyes narrowed as she considered the offer. It was a risky plan, but one that could provide crucial information. After a moment, she nodded. "Very well, Commander. Assemble your team and prepare for insertion. But be warned. If this is a ploy to betray us, the consequences will be severe." Vex stood at attention, his expression resolute. "I understand, Admiral. I give you my word. I am committed to exposing the truth, whatever it takes." As Vex left to prepare for his mission, Thora turned her attention back to the standoff with the blockade. The next few hours would be critical, determining not only the fate of their mission, but potentially the future of human-Yadaran relations. In the medical bay, Dr. Lyra monitored Powell's vital signs as the induced coma took hold. Her trained eyes caught an anomaly in the readings, prompting her to conduct a more thorough genetic scan. What she discovered sent a chill down her spine. Powell's DNA showed signs of exposure to an unknown alien substance, complicating her treatment plans and adding another layer of mystery to an already complex situation. As the stalwart defender hung in space, facing down the blockade, the crew held their breath, waiting to see how events would unfold. The fate of two civilizations now rested on a knife's edge, with countless lives hanging in the balance. With countless lives hanging in the balance. Admiral Thora's mind raced, formulating a plan that could potentially break the deadlock and secure their position at Nexus Prime. All ships, prepare for Operation Shield Breaker, Thora commanded, her voice steady despite the tension coursing through her. Stalwart Defender will take point. Smaller vessels, form up behind us in Delta formation. As her crew scrambled to execute her orders, Thora opened a secure channel to the ships carrying the crucial evidence. Captains, your primary objective is to reach Nexus Prime intact. Use our larger vessels as cover and be prepared for evasive maneuvers. The fleet began to move as one, with the Stalwart Defender at the forefront. The massive ship's shields glowed brightly as it absorbed the first volley from Captain Zorn's blockade. Thora gripped her command chair, feeling the vibrations of impacts through the deck plating. Helm, push forward. Weapons. Return fire but aim to disable, not destroy, Thora ordered, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The space between the fleets lit up with weapon fire, creating a dazzling and deadly light show. Smaller ships darted between the larger vessels, using the chaos to slip through gaps in the blockade's formation. On Nexus Prime, Commander Vex and his team found themselves pinned down in a maintenance corridor, the sound of approaching security forces echoing off the metal walls. We need a diversion, Vex hissed to his second-in-command. Access that terminal and overload the power junctions in Sectors 7 through 12. As a subordinate worked furiously at the console, Vex readied his weapon. The corridor suddenly plunged into darkness, followed by a series of distant explosions. Alarms blared throughout the station as emergency systems kicked in. "Move now!" Vex ordered, leading his team through the confusion. They slipped past disoriented security patrols, making their way towards the docking bays. Back on the Stalwart Defender, Dr. Lyra stood over Powell's unconscious form, her multifaceted eyes scanning the readouts of various medical devices. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the procedure ahead. Initiating regenerative sequence, she announced to her medical team. Prepare the human stem cell infusion. As she worked, combining Yadern and human medical technologies in ways never before attempted, Powell's body began to react. His vital signs fluctuated wildly, forcing Lyra to make split-second adjustments to the treatment protocols. "There's something interfering with the cellular integration," Lyra muttered, her fingers flying over the control panel. "The alien substance in his DNA. It's acting like a catalyst, but I can't predict its effects." In the heat of battle, Admiral Thora's comm device chirped with an incoming priority transmission. The face of High Counselor Jean appeared on her personal screen, his usually calm demeanor marred by obvious stress. "Admiral Thora, I don't have much time," Jean said urgently. "I've been gathering evidence against Grand Admiral Zarn and his corrupt faction. I can disable the blockade's command systems, but I need assurances. Can you guarantee the safety of the evidence and Krell's capture?" Thora's antenna twitched as she quickly weighed her options. "You have my word, High Counselor. We'll protect the evidence with our lives and ensure Krell faces justice." Jin nodded grimly. "Very well. Prepare your fleet. In exactly 2 minutes, the blockade will lose power to weapons and propulsion." As Jun's face disappeared from the screen, Thora immediately began issuing orders. "All ships, prepare for full breakthrough. Escort vessels, tighten formation around the evidence carriers." The next 2 minutes felt like an eternity as the battle raged on. Then suddenly, the blockade ships began to drift, their weapons falling silent. Captain Zorn's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression a mixture of confusion and anger. "What have you done?" he demanded, but Thora cut the transmission short. "All ships, push through now," she commanded. The stalwart defender surged forward, its hull groaning under the strain. Weapons fire from manually operated turrets on the blockade ships scored hits along its flanks, opening breaches on several decks. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship as emergency force fields snapped into place, preventing further atmosphere loss. Despite the damage, Thora's fleet broke through the defensive line. The smaller ships carrying the evidence zipped past the disabled blockade vessels, making a beeline for Nexus Prime's docking bays. As the situation in space reached its climax, the lower levels of Nexus Prime erupted into chaos. Riots broke out as news of the battle spread, with tensions between humans and Yadrins threatening to boil over into full-scale violence. In the midst of this turmoil, a human merchant named Marcus Blackwood rallied a group of like-minded individuals. "Listen up," he shouted over the din of the panicking crowd. "We need to protect each other, regardless of species. Anyone who wants to help, form up and follow me." Blackwood's impromptu militia began moving through the station, creating safe zones and escorting vulnerable civilians to secure areas. Their actions helped prevent the situation from spiraling completely out of control, earning grudging respect from both humans and Yadrins caught in the chaos. Commander Vex and his team finally reached their shuttle, only to find themselves surrounded by a last wave of security forces. As they exchanged fire, Vex's comm device buzzed with an incoming transmission from Admiral Thora. "Commander, new orders." Thora's voice crackled through the device. "Rendezvous with High Counselor Jean and escort him to safety. His location is being transmitted now." Vex cursed under his breath, but acknowledged the order. "Change of plans," he told his team as they fought their way onto the shuttle. "We're making a detour." As Vex's shuttle took off, weaving through the chaotic traffic around Nexus Prime, the experimental treatment on Captain Powell reached a critical juncture. Powell's body convulsed on the medical bay table, his skin taking on an otherworldly glow. Cellular reconstruction accelerating beyond predicted parameters, Dr. Lyra announced, her voice tense. "The alien substance is integrating with his DNA at an alarming rate." Suddenly, Powell's eyes snapped open, glowing with an intense, unnatural light. He sat up abruptly, gasping for air as if surfacing from deep water. "Doctor," he rasped, his voice barely recognizable, "something's happening to me. I can sense things. The ship, the battle outside. It's like I can feel it all." Before Dr. Lyra could respond, the ship rocked violently as a new threat emerged. A massive Yadrin battle fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, led by an imposing flagship. The main view screen on the bridge flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of Grand Admiral Zarn. "This is Grand Admiral Zarn." His voice boomed across all frequencies. "By the authority vested in me by the Emergency Powers Act, I demand the immediate surrender of Admiral Thora, Commander Vex, and all evidence related to these baseless accusations of corruption. Comply now, or face the full might of the Yadrin military." Admiral Thora stood on her battered bridge, her antenna rigid with commitment as she faced this new, overwhelming threat. The next few moments would determine not just the fate of her mission, but potentially the future of human-Yadrin relations and the stability of both their civilizations. As Zarn's fleet took up attack positions around Nexus Prime, Thora's mind raced through potential strategies. She knew that the evidence they carried could expose Zarn's corruption and potentially avert a catastrophic war. But first, they had to survive long enough to present it. With her ship damaged, her allies scattered, and an unknown factor in the form of Powell's transformed state, Thora prepared to make the most crucial decisions of her career. Admiral Thora's antenna twitched as she processed the gravity of the situation. With Grand Admiral Zarn's fleet bearing down on them, she knew that immediate action was necessary to protect both her crew and the vital evidence they carried. "Initiate Emergency Protocol Sigma-7, Thora commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. "All non-essential personnel are to evacuate to Nexus Prime immediately. We need to minimize potential casualties." As her orders echoed through the ship's communication systems, Thora opened a channel to Nexus Prime. The face of Marcus Blackwood, the human merchant who had rallied a militia during the earlier riots, appeared on the screen. "Mr. Blackwood, I need your assistance," Thora said, her eyes locked on the human's determined expression. "We're evacuating non-essential crew to the station. Can you secure safe zones for our people?" Blackwood nodded, his mind focused with perseverance. "We've already established several secure areas. I'll coordinate with your evacuation teams to ensure everyone's safety." As the Stalwart Defender's crew began their orderly evacuation, Commander Vex and his team were navigating the labyrinthine corridors of Nexus Prime's administrative sector. They moved with practiced efficiency, weapons at the ready, until they reached a nondescript door hidden behind a holographic wall. Vex input a complex series of codes, and the door slid open to reveal High Counselor Jun, his normally pristine robes rumpled and his eyes wide with tension. "Commander, thank the stars you've arrived," Jun said, his voice barely above a whisper. He pressed a small, glowing data crystal into Vex's hand. "This contains everything we need to expose Zarn's corruption. Financial records, intercepted communications, sworn testimonies. It's all here." Vex nodded, securing the crystal in a hidden compartment of his armor. "We need to move, Counselor. The station's not secure, and Zarn's forces could be anywhere." As they made their way towards the main concourse, the sound of boots on metal flooring echoed from an adjacent corridor. Vex raised his hand, signaling his team to take cover, just as a group of security officers rounded the corner, their uniforms bearing the subtle insignia of Zarn's loyalists. "Hostiles ahead," Vex hissed into his comm. "Protect the Counselor at all costs." The concourse erupted into a fierce firefight. Energy bolts sizzled through the air as Vex's team took up defensive positions behind overturned kiosks and support pillars. Civilians screamed and scattered, seeking shelter from the sudden violence. Vex's mind raced, analyzing the layout of the concourse and the enemy's positions. He spotted a maintenance access panel near a decorative fountain and formulated a plan. "Gren, Tala, suppressing fire on my mark," he ordered. "Counselor, stay close to me." When Vex gave the signal, his team laid down a barrage of covering fire. He grabbed Jun's arm and sprinted for the access panel, deftly bypassing the security lock and ushering the Counselor inside. They crawled through the narrow maintenance shaft, emerging behind the enemy's position. With precision and speed, Vex neutralized 3 of Zarn's loyalists before they could react. The remaining security officers, now caught in a crossfire, quickly surrendered. Back on the Stalwart Defender, the medical bay was a flurry of activity as Dr. Lyra monitored Captain Powell's rapidly changing condition. The alien substance in his DNA had fully activated, triggering a startling metamorphosis. Powell's body convulsed on the medical table, his muscles rippling and expanding beneath his skin. His bones creaked and shifted, increasing in density. Even his facial features seemed to sharpen, becoming more defined. Dr. Lyra's multifaceted eyes darted between the various monitoring devices, her fingers flying over control panels as she attempted to stabilize the transformation. "Cellular reconfiguration accelerating beyond all known parameters," she muttered, her voice tense. Suddenly, Powell's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. He sat up abruptly, gasping for air. The medical staff stepped back, startled by his sudden movement. I feel different," Powell said, his voice deeper and more resonant than before. He flexed his hands, marveling at the newfound strength he could feel coursing through his body. Everything seems clearer, sharper. Dr. Lyra approached cautiously, scanning Powell with a handheld device. Captain, your physical and neural structures have undergone significant changes. Your muscle density, bone strength, and cognitive functions are all operating at levels far beyond normal human parameters. Before Powell could respond, Admiral Thora's voice came through the medical bay's communication system. Dr. Lyra, what's the status of Captain Powell? He's conscious and enhanced, Admiral, Lyra replied, still staring at the readouts in disbelief. We need him on the bridge immediately, Thora ordered. The situation has escalated. Powell stood, marveling at the ease with which he moved his transformed body. I'm on my way, Admiral, he said, his mind already racing with tactical possibilities. As Powell strode onto the bridge, Grand Admiral Zarn's face filled the main view screen, his expression a mask of cold fury. This is your final warning, Thora, he snarled. Surrender now, or I will open fire on both your ship and Nexus Prime. Thora's antenna twitched as she met Zarn's gaze. Without breaking eye contact, she activated a wideband transmission. To all ships in the system and all Yadran communication hubs, I am transmitting evidence of Grand Admiral Zarn's corruption and crimes against both our peoples. The bridge crew watched in tense silence as the data streamed out across the stars. On the monitor, they could see confusion ripple through Zarn's fleet. Several ships broke formation, their captains unwilling to follow a leader exposed as corrupt. Powell stepped forward, his enhanced mind quickly analyzing the tactical situation. Admiral, he said, his voice filled with newfound confidence. I have a plan that could end this conflict quickly and decisively. As Thora turned to face Powell, Zarn's enraged voice boomed through the speakers. You dare to spread these lies? All ships, commence attack. Destroy them all. The space around Nexus Prime erupted into chaos as Zarn's loyal ships opened fire. The stalwart defender shuddered under the assault, its already damaged hull groaning under the strain. Amidst the chaos, Powell outlined his daring strategy to Admiral Thora. As she listened, her antenna twitched with a mixture of surprise and grudging admiration. It's risky, Thora said, her eyes narrowing as she considered the plan. But it might be our only chance to end this without massive casualties on both sides. She turned to her communications officer. Contact Commander Vex. Tell him to secure the main engineering section of Nexus Prime. We're going to need full access to the station's power core. As the order was relayed, Powell moved to a nearby console, his fingers flying over the controls with inhuman speed and precision. The station schematics appeared on the screen, and he began the complex calculations needed to turn Nexus Prime itself into a weapon. The fate of two civilizations now hung in the balance, with Powell's enhanced abilities and Thora's strategic acumen standing as the thin line between peace and all-out war. As the battle raged around them, the crew of the stalwart defender raced against time to implement their bold strategy. As the battle raged around them, the crew of the stalwart defender raced against time to implement their bold strategy. Powell's fingers flew across the console with inhuman speed, his enhanced mind processing vast amounts of data simultaneously. Admiral, he called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. I've established a link with Nexus Prime's power grid. We're ready to begin the modifications. Thora nodded, her antenna twitching, as she assessed the tactical situation. Do it, Captain. We'll buy you the time you need. The space around Nexus Prime erupted into a dazzling display of energy weapons fire as Zarn's loyal ships concentrated their assault on the stalwart defender. The ship shuddered under the barrage, its shields flickering dangerously. Evasive pattern Delta 3, Thora commanded, her voice calm but firm. Tactical. Focus our fire on their lead cruiser's port shield emitters. As the stalwart defender weaved through the storm of incoming fire, Powell coordinated with the engineering team on Nexus Prime. His enhanced cognitive abilities allowed him to simultaneously direct the station's power reconfiguration, analyze incoming tactical data, and assist Thora in coordinating the fleet's defensive maneuvers. Meanwhile, on Nexus Prime, Commander Vex and High Council Jun fought their way through the administrative sector, heading for the main engineering section. As they rounded a corner, they encountered a heavily fortified position manned by Zarn's loyalists. "Cover!" Vex shouted, diving behind a fallen support beam as energy bolts sizzled past. He tapped his communicator, connecting with Marcus Blackwood. "Blackwood, we're pinned down in Sector 7G. Any chance of support?" Blackwood's voice crackled through the comm, strained but determined. "We're stretched thin, Commander. Riots breaking out in the residential sectors. I'll see what I can do, but it might take time." Vex gritted his teeth, assessing their options. "Understood. We'll find another way." Back on the Stalwart Defender's bridge, Admiral Thora made a quick decision. She opened a channel to the neutral Yatteran ships that had broken away from Zarn's fleet. "This is Admiral Thora to all neutral vessels," she broadcast, her voice steady and authoritative. "You've seen the evidence of Zarn's corruption. Now I ask for your help in protecting the innocent civilians caught in this conflict. Will you stand with us?" For a tense moment, there was silence. Then, one by one, the neutral ships began to respond, pledging their support. Thora allowed herself a small smile as she watched several Yatteran vessels move to engage Zarn's forces and deploy troops to assist on Nexus Prime. As the tide of the ground battle began to shift, Powell's modifications to the station's power systems neared completion. Warning alarms blared throughout the complex as energy levels spiked, causing localized blackouts and system overloads. "Admiral," Powell called out, his voice strained for the first time since his transformation, "the power buildup is causing structural instabilities. We need to act fast." Thora nodded, her antenna rigid with tension. "How much longer, Captain?" 5 minutes, maybe less," Powell replied, his fingers a blur as he worked to stabilize the systems. Suddenly, a new threat emerged. Grand Admiral Zarn's flagship broke formation, accelerating towards Nexus Prime with shields at maximum. "He's going to attempt a forced docking," Thora realized aloud. "All ships, concentrate fire on Zarn's flagship. We must prevent him from boarding the station." The space around Nexus Prime lit up with renewed intensity as Thora's allied fleet, including the neutral Yatteran ships, focused their assault on Zarn's approaching vessel. Yet the flagship's advanced shields held, shrugging off the combined firepower as it drew closer to the station. In the main engineering section of Nexus Prime, Vex engine finally broke through the last line of Zarn's loyalists. As they secured the area, Powell's voice came through their comms. "Commander, I reconfigured the station's power distribution network." Powell explained rapidly. "You need to activate the electromagnetic pulse manually from your location." Vex moved to the main control console, but as he initiated the activation sequence, a power surge sparked across the panel. The console sputtered and died, smoke rising from its circuitry. "Powell, we have a problem," Vex reported, his voice tense. "The control console is fried. We'll have to trigger the pulse manually." Powell's enhanced mind quickly processed the implications. "The only way to do that is by directly connecting the power cables in Section 12C. But, Commander, that area is highly radioactive." Vex exchanged a grim look with Jun. "Understood, Captain. We'll get it done." As Vex and Jun prepared for their dangerous task, Zarn's flagship began its docking procedure with Nexus Prime. The station shuddered under the strain of the impending electromagnetic pulse and the forced connection with Zarn's ship. On the Stalwart Defender's bridge, Powell suddenly staggered, gripping a nearby console for support. His enhanced body was beginning to show signs of strain, pushed to its limits by the intense mental and physical exertion. "Captain," Thora called out, concern evident in her voice. "Are you all right?" Powell straightened, his eyebrows furrowed. "I'm fine, Admiral, but we have a new problem. The electromagnetic pulse will likely disable our ships as well as Zarn's. I need to find a way to shield our key systems and fast." As Powell raced to protect their allies from the impending pulse, Vex and Jun entered the radioactive section of Nexus Prime's engineering bay. They moved quickly, knowing that every second of exposure increased the danger to their bodies. There, Vex pointed to a massive set of power cables, each as thick as a person's torso. "We need to connect those to trigger the pulse." As they approached the cables, the station rocked violently. Zarn's forces had breached the outer defenses and were now pouring into Nexus Prime. Time was running out. With Zarn's troops advancing, Powell's condition deteriorating, and the station itself on the brink of overload, the fate of the entire conflict hung in the balance. The next few moments would determine whether their bold plan would save them all or lead to catastrophic failure. Failure or lead to catastrophic consequences. The bridge of the stalwart defender fell silent, the crew holding their breath as they awaited the outcome of their audacious attempt. Commander Vex surveyed the radioactive engineering section, his eyes falling on the massive power cables that held the key to their survival. Without hesitation, he turned to High Counselor Jun, his voice firm with perseverance. "I'll make the connection myself," Vex declared, already moving towards a protective suit storage. Jun's eyes widened, his antenna twitching in alarm. "Commander, the radiation levels in there are lethal. You can't." "We don't have a choice," Vex interrupted, sealing the suit around himself. "Every second we waste brings Zarn closer to victory." Before Jun could protest further, Vex stepped into the hazardous zone. The Geiger counter on his suit immediately began clicking furiously, its display showing radiation levels far beyond safe limits. Gritting his teeth, Vex pressed forward, his eyes fixed on the power coupling controls. Aboard Zarn's flagship, the docking procedure completed with a resounding clang. Grand Admiral Zarn, his eyes blazing with fury, led a contingent of heavily armed troops onto Nexus Prime. "Secure the command center," he barked, his voice echoing through the station's corridors. "I want that evidence destroyed, and I want Thora's head." Marcus Blackwood's voice crackled over the station-wide comm system. "All militia units, converge on Sector 8. We have multiple hostiles entering through the main docking bay. Engage and contain." The station's corridors erupted into chaos as Blackwood's militia clashed with Zarn's boarding party. Energy weapons fire lit up the confined spaces, and the acrid smell of ozone filled the air. Blackwood himself led a group of defenders, his face grim as he watched good men and women fall to Zarn's superior firepower. On the stalwart defender's bridge, Captain Powell's enhanced body began to falter under the immense strain. Blood vessels burst in his eyes, turning the whites of vivid crimson. A trickle of blood ran from his nose as he continued his frantic work at the console. Admiral Thora noticed Powell's deteriorating condition and quickly opened a channel to the medical bay. "Dr. Lyra, report to the bridge immediately. Captain Powell needs emergency assistance." As Lyra rushed to the bridge, Thora took over coordinating the fleet's defensive maneuvers. Her antenna twitched rapidly as she processed the tactical data, issuing a stream of orders to the Allied ships. "Form up in Sharan defensive pattern," she commanded. "Minimize your exposure profile to the electromagnetic pulse." In the engineering section, Vex fought through waves of nausea and dizziness as he approached the power coupling controls. His protective suit, overwhelmed by the intense radiation, began to fail. Warning indicators flashed across his helmet display, but Vex ignored them, focusing solely on his task. With trembling hands, he began to make the final connections. Each movement sent jolts of pain through his body, but he pressed on, driven by the knowledge that failure meant the end of everything they had fought for. High Counselor Jun, watching anxiously from beyond the radiation zone, organized the last line of defense outside the command center. He directed a motley crew of Yadrin security personnel and human volunteers to create makeshift barricades, transforming the area into a fortified position. "Hold this line at all costs," Jin ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "We cannot let Zarn reach the command center." Back on the stalwart defender, Powell's body finally gave out. With a final Herculean effort, he transmitted the shielding modifications to the Allied fleet. "It's done," he gasped before collapsing to the deck. Dr. Lyra rushed to Powell's side, her medical scanner whirring as she assessed his condition. "He's in severe metabolic distress," she reported to Thora. "His enhanced physiology is breaking down under the strain." In the engineering section, Vex's vision blurred as he made the final power connection. His fingers, clumsy in the failing protective suit, slipped on the controls. With a supreme effort of will, he activated the electromagnetic pulse generator. "It's done," he whispered, his legs giving out beneath him. As he slumped to the floor, the station's power systems began to overload, building towards a pulse that would decide the fate of the battle. A blinding flash erupted from Nexus Prime, expanding rapidly through space. Zarn's flagship and his loyalist fleet went dark, their systems overloaded by the massive energy wave. Aboard Nexus Prime, emergency lights flickered and died as the pulse ravaged the station's power grid. In the sudden darkness, Marcus Blackwood seized the initiative. "Now!" he shouted to his militia. "Push them back while they're disoriented." The defenders surged forward, using their knowledge of the station's layout to outmaneuver Zarn's troops in the darkness. The sound of hand-to-hand combat filled the corridors as energy weapons, rendered useless by the pulse, gave way to more primitive forms of warfare. On the stalwart defender, Thora's foresight paid off. While the ship's main systems were offline, emergency power kept essential functions running. "All functional ships move to secure Zarn's vessels," she ordered. "Don't let them restore power." As the battle raged across Nexus Prime and in the space around it, the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. The actions of a few brave individuals had turned the tide, but the conflict was a long way to go. In the darkness of the disabled station, both sides regrouped, knowing that the next few moments would determine the future of human-Yadrin relations and the stability of the entire sector. The electromagnetic pulse had done its job, disabling Zarn's forces and turning the tide of battle. However, the sudden silence that fell over Nexus Prime was far from peaceful. As emergency power slowly restored minimal lighting to the station's corridors, High Counselor Jun wasted no time in establishing a temporary command center. He commandeered the main conference room, its large tactical displays flickering to life as technicians worked feverishly to restore full functionality. "Status report," Jin demanded, his antenna twitching as he absorbed the influx of information from various sectors of the station. A young Yadrin officer approached, datapad in hand. "High Counselor, we've regained control of 60% of the station. Blackwood's militia is conducting sweeps to root out any remaining loyalists." Jin nodded, his eyes scanning the tactical overlay. "And Zarn?" "Captured. Suri's being held in the high-security detention area under heavy guard." "Excellent. Have him brought to me for questioning as soon as possible." As Jun coordinated the stabilization efforts on Nexus Prime, Admiral Thora's voice crackled over the newly restored communication system. "High Counselor, we've secured Zarn's flagship and are moving to disable the remaining enemy vessels. Request permission to send boarding parties." "Granted, Admiral," Jim replied, "but proceed with caution. We need any evidence of Zarn's corruption intact." On the bridge of the stalwart defender, Thora turned to her crew. "You heard the Counselor. Assemble joint human-Yadrin teams for boarding operations. I want those ships locked down and their crews detained for questioning." As Thora's orders were carried out, activity in the stalwart defender's medical bay reached a fever pitch. Dr. Lyra hovered over Captain Powell's unconscious form, her medical scanner humming as it analyzed his vital signs. "His neural patterns are stabilizing," she muttered, more to herself than to the anxious crew members gathered nearby. "But these physiological changes, I've never seen anything like it." Powell's eyes suddenly snapped open, his enhanced mind immediately processing his surroundings. "Status report," he demanded, his voice hoarse but strong. Dr. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, attempting to keep him in bed. "Captain, you need to rest. Your body has undergone significant dash." "No time," Powell interrupted, swinging his legs off the bed. He stood, swaying slightly as he adjusted to his altered physiology. "The situation?" A nearby ensign quickly filled him in on the events that had transpired during his unconsciousness. Powell's enhanced mind rapidly analyzed the information, formulating strategies and contingencies. "I need to get to the command center," he declared, already moving towards the door. "There's too much at stake for me to lie here." Back on Nexus Prime, Marcus Blackwood led a team of militia members through the winding corridors of the station's lower levels. The acrid smell of ozone and burnt circuitry filled the air as they methodically cleared each section. "Watch your corners," Blackwood warned, his voice low. "Some of Zarn's loyalists might still be holed up down here." As if on cue, a burst of energy weapon fire erupted from a darkened alcove. Blackwood's team dove for cover, returning fire with practiced precision. "Push forward," Blackwood shouted above the din. "We need to secure this sector." The militia advanced, their coordinated efforts quickly overwhelming the remaining pockets of resistance. As the last of Zarn's loyalists surrendered, Blackwood activated his comm link. "Blackwood to command. Lower sector secure. Moving on to the next quadrant." In the high-security detention area, Grand Admiral Zarn sat in stony silence, his once immaculate uniform now torn and scorched. The door to his cell hissed open, revealing High Counselor Jun flanked by armed guards. "It's over, Zarn," Jun stated, his voice cold. "Your fleet is disabled. Your loyalists are being rounded up as we speak. You've lost." Zarn's eyes narrowed, a sneer playing at the corners of his mouth. "You fool. You have no idea what forces you've set in motion. This goes far beyond me, beyond the Yadern High Command." Jun leaned in close, his antenna quivering with almost unchecked anger. "Then you'd better start talking. Because right now, you're the only one who can shed light on the full extent of this conspiracy." As Jun began his interrogation of Zarn, the combined human-Yadern fleet regrouped around Nexus Prime. Captured enemy vessels were towed into designated holding areas, their crews placed under guard pending further investigation. Admiral Thora stood on the bridge of the stalwart defender, overseeing the complex dance of ships as they maneuvered into defensive positions. Her antenna twitched as she processed the incoming data streams, coordinating the efforts of dozens of vessels simultaneously. "Ma'am," a sensor operator called out, his voice tense. "Long-range scanners are picking up something unusual." Thora moved to the sensor station, her eyes widening as she took in the readings. "Alert High Counselor Jun and Captain Powell immediately. We may have a new situation developing." As the warning was relayed, the crew of the stalwart defender and the inhabitants of Nexus Prime braced themselves for what might come next. The battle against Zarn's forces had been won, but a new challenge was already looming on the horizon. Horizon. The sensor operator's voice cut through the tense atmosphere on the stalwart defender's bridge. "Admiral, I'm detecting multiple signatures entering the system. Configuration unknown, but they're moving fast." Admiral Thora's antenna twitched as she processed the information. "Alert Nexus Prime and all allied vessels. Unknown fleet approaching." As the warning spread through the allied forces, Captain Powell strode onto the bridge, his enhanced physiology allowing him to move with purpose despite his recent collapse. He made his way to the sensor station, his eyes rapidly scanning the incoming data. "Those energy signatures," he muttered, his enhanced mind processing the information at an unprecedented rate. "I've never seen anything like this before." Powell's fingers flew across the console, analyzing the data with inhuman speed. "Admiral," he called out, "these ships are using some form of advanced propulsion technology. It's beyond anything in our database, human or Yatteran." Thora nodded, her expression grim. "Relay that information to High Counselor Jean immediately. We need to adjust our strategy." As Powell transmitted the data to Nexus Prime, Thora began issuing orders to the fleet. "All ships, form up in defensive formation Epsilon 7. Prepare for potential hostile contact." On Nexus Prime, High Counselor Jean received Powell's analysis with growing concern. He turned to his advisors, his antenna quivering with tension. "We cannot afford to be caught off guard again. Implement Emergency Protocol Zeta 9. Throughout the station, klaxons blared as Jean's orders were carried out. Marcus Blackwood's voice echoed through the comm systems, directing the remaining civilians to designated evacuation zones. "All non-essential personnel, report to your nearest emergency shelter immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Blackwood and his militia moved swiftly through the station's levels, transforming maintenance bays into fortified shelters. They worked with grim efficiency, setting up defensive perimeters and distributing emergency supplies. As the unknown fleet drew closer, a message suddenly blared across all communication channels. A deep, resonant voice filled the airwaves, its tone imperious and unyielding. "Attention, inhabitants of this system. We are the Zarkoth Imperium. Your recent political instability has not gone unnoticed. We hereby declare our intention to annex this space and bring order to your chaotic realm. Resistance is inadvisable." The message sent shockwaves through the Allied forces. On the Stalwart Defender's bridge, Powell and Thora exchanged glances. "Admiral," Powell said, his enhanced mind already formulating strategies, "we need more information on their capabilities. Permission to lead a reconnaissance mission?" Thora hesitated, aware of Powell's recent collapse. "Captain, your condition dash is irrelevant," Powell interrupted. "My enhancements make me the best candidate for this mission. We need that intel." After a moment's consideration, Thora nodded. "Assemble your team. But Powell, be careful. We can't afford to lose you." As Powell left to prepare for the mission, Thora opened a channel to Nexus Prime. "High Counselor, we need every advantage we can get. Are there any defensive systems we haven't utilized yet?" Jean's expression tightened. "There is one option, but it's highly experimental and potentially unstable. At this point, Counselor, we need every option on the table." Jean nodded grimly. "Very well. I'm authorizing the activation of the Gravitational Disruptor Network. It's a series of devices capable of altering local space-time. If successful, it could impede the Zarkov fleet's advance." As Jean's orders were carried out, a joint team of human and Yatteran engineers raced to bring the experimental system online. In the station's core, technicians worked feverishly, their fingers dancing across control panels as they initialized the complex network of gravitational disruptors. Outside Nexus Prime, the space around the station began to shimmer and distort. Visible ripples spread outward, creating a maze of spatial anomalies that the approaching Zarkoth ships would have to navigate. On the Stalwart Defender, Powell briefed his hand-picked team. "Our mission is simple but crucial," he explained, his enhanced mind allowing him to process multiple streams of tactical data simultaneously. "We'll use our hybrid systems to slip past their outer defenses and gather as much intelligence as possible." As Powell's team made final preparations, The lead Zarkov ships encountered the gravitational distortions. Their sleek, otherworldly vessels slowed, forced to alter course as they navigated the treacherous spatial terrain. Seizing the opportunity, Powell gave the order to launch. The stalwart defender detached from its docking bay, its engines humming with a unique resonance as human and Yadrin technologies worked in perfect harmony. Engaging stealth protocols, Powell announced, his fingers dancing across the control panel. The ship seemed to fade from view, its energy signature masked by a combination of human cloaking technology and Yadrin energy dispersal techniques. As they slipped past the outer edges of the Zarkov fleet, Powell's enhanced senses detected something unusual. "Those support ships," he murmured, his eyes narrowing as he studied the sensor readings. "Their configurations. They're familiar." With growing unease, Powell realized the truth. Some of the smaller vessels accompanying the Zarkov warships were of human and Yadrin design. The implications were staggering. "Stalwart defender to Nexus Prime," Powell transmitted, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "We've made a critical discovery. The Zarkov are using captured human and Yadrin ships in their fleet. I repeat, they have our ships." As the Allied forces grappled with this new information, the battle for Nexus Prime loomed ever closer. The Zarkov fleet pushed through the gravitational distortions, their advanced technology allowing them to adapt quickly. Nexus Prime's automated defense system sprang to life, launching a barrage of energy weapons and guided projectiles at the approaching enemy. The lead Zarkov ship's shields flared brilliantly as they absorbed the impact. Their advance momentarily halted but far from stopped. Powell, seeing an opportunity in the chaos, maneuvered the stalwart defender closer to one of the captured vessels. "We need to establish contact with any surviving crew," he told his team. "They could be our key to understanding and defeating the Zarkov." As Powell worked to establish a secure communication link, the battle for Nexus Prime began in earnest. The Human-Yadrin alliance faced its greatest challenge yet, their very existence hanging in the balance as they confronted an enemy of unprecedented power and technological superiority. The next few hours would determine the fate of both species, testing the strength of their newfound alliance and their ability to adapt in the face of an existential threat. As energy weapons flared and ships maneuvered in the void, the true test of their grit was only beginning. As energy weapons flared and ships maneuvered in the void, Captain Powell's enhanced senses detected a faint signal emanating from one of the captured human vessels. "This is our chance," he muttered, his fingers dancing across the console. Initiating secure communication protocols. The bridge of the stalwart defender fell silent as Powell worked, the tension palpable. Suddenly, a crackling voice filled the air. "This is Commander Sarah Taylor of the HMS Intrepid. We're under Zarkov control. Who am I speaking with?" Powell's eyes lit up. "Commander Taylor, this is Captain Powell of the Stalwart Defender. We're here to help. What's your situation?" As Taylor relayed crucial information about Zarkov tactics and weaknesses, Powell's enhanced mind processed and analyzed the data at an unprecedented rate. His eyes widened as he realized the implications. "Their shields," he breathed. "They fluctuate at regular intervals to prevent energy buildup. That's our window." Without wasting a moment, Powell transmitted a coded message back to Nexus Prime. "Admiral Thora, High Counselor Jun, I'm sending you vital intelligence. The Zarkov shields have a vulnerability we can exploit." On Nexus Prime, Commander Vex pushed himself off his medical bed, ignoring the protests of the medical staff. "I need to be out there," he growled, his body still weak from radiation exposure. Making his way to the command center, Vex found High Counselor Jun reviewing Powell's transmission. "Counselor," Vex said, his voice hoarse but determined, "let me coordinate our ground teams. We need to prepare for potential boarding attempts." Jun's antenna twitched with concern. "Commander, your condition dash is irrelevant. Vex interrupted. My experience is needed now more than ever. Reluctantly, Jin nodded. Very well. Take charge of our defense efforts. As Vex began integrating the human and Yadrin security forces, Admiral Thora's voice rang out across the comm channels. All ships, prepare for synchronized assault. Target Zarkov vessels on my mark. The human Yadrin fleet moved into position, their weapons primed and ready. As the Zarkov shields reached their fluctuation point, Thora gave the order. Fire! A coordinated barrage of energy weapons and projectiles streaked across space, slamming into the vulnerable Zarkov ships. Explosions blossomed against the dark backdrop of space as several enemy vessels sustained significant damage. They're falling back, an officer on Nexus Prime exclaimed. It worked. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. High Counselor Zhun's voice cut through the cheers. Activate the gravitational singularity generator. Now's our chance to press our advantage. Deep within Nexus Prime, engineers scrambled to bring the massive device online. The space around the station began to warp and distort as an immense gravity well formed, disrupting the Zarkov fleet's formation. However, the activation had unforeseen consequences. Alarms blared throughout Nexus Prime as the outer rings began to buckle under the intense gravitational forces. Evacuate the outer sectors immediately. Marcus Blackwood's voice echoed through the station. His militia moved swiftly, guiding panicked civilians towards the central core. In the heart of the Zarkov fleet, Powell and the stalwart defender's crew worked feverishly to free the captured vessels. Taylor, we're disabling the Zarkov control systems now, Powell transmitted. Be ready to take control on my mark. With precise weapons fire and complex hacking algorithms, Powell's team systematically disabled the Zarkov systems. One by one, the captured ships broke free, their crews immediately turning against their former captors. But the Zarkov were far from defeated. A new threat emerged as swarms of combat drones poured from the alien vessels, their energy weapons targeting Nexus Prime's defenses. Drone swarms incoming. Thora's voice crackled over the comm. All fighter squadrons, engage and protect the gravity well generators at all costs. The space around Nexus Prime erupted into a furious dogfight. Human and Yadrin pilots pushed their experimental fighters to the limit, weaving through the chaos to intercept the Zarkov drones. On the station, Commander Vex led a team through damaged corridors, fighting off Zarkov boarding parties. Set up a choke point here, he ordered, his tactical mind analyzing every angle of approach. We can't let them reach the generators. As the battle raged on multiple fronts, Powell made a split-second decision. We're going for their flagship, he announced to his crew. If we can disrupt their command structure, we might just turn this fight around. The stalwart defender surged forward, its hybrid engines pushing to maximum output. Powell's enhanced reflexes allowed him to navigate through the chaos of battle, dodging energy beams and debris as they closed in on the massive Zarkov command ship. Target their bridge, Powell ordered. Fire everything we've got. The stalwart defender unleashed a devastating barrage, its weapons enhanced by both human and Yadrin technology. The precision strike found its mark, engulfing the Zarkov flagship's bridge in a series of explosions. The effect was immediate. The coordinated movements of the Zarkov fleet began to falter, their formations becoming erratic and disorganized. Now's our chance, Admiral Thora's voice rang out. All ships, concentrate fire on their disorganized formation. Push them back. As the tide of battle began to turn, a new crisis emerged. The gravitational singularity at the heart of Nexus Prime grew increasingly unstable, its effects becoming more violent and unpredictable. High Counselor, a frantic engineer reported, the singularity is collapsing in on itself. If we don't shut it down soon, it could form a black hole. Zhun's antenna quivered with tension as he processed the information. The Human-Yadrin alliance now faced an impossible choice. maintain the weapon that was turning the tide of battle, or shut it down to save Nexus Prime and everyone on it. As the Zarkov fleet regrouped for another assault, and the station's very existence hung in the balance, the next few moments would determine the fate of not just this battle, but the future of human-Yadrin relations and their place in the galaxy. Zhen's antenna twitched as he processed the dire situation. The gravitational singularity, their most potent weapon against the Zarkov, now threatened to consume everything they fought to protect. "We have no choice," Zhen declared, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "Initiate emergency shutdown protocols for the singularity generator." As engineers raced to comply with the order, alarms blared throughout Nexus Prime. The station shuddered, its outer rings groaning under the strain of the intense gravitational forces. "All non-essential personnel, evacuate to the central hub immediately," Marcus Blackwood's voice echoed through the comm systems. His militia sprang into action, guiding panicked civilians through damaged corridors and sealed bulkheads. Amidst the chaos, Captain Powell received an urgent transmission from Admiral Thora. His enhanced mind quickly processed the critical data about the singularity's instability. "Admiral," Powell responded, his fingers flying over the Stalwart Defender's controls, "I have a plan. We can use our hybrid systems to generate a stabilizing energy pulse. It's risky, but it might be our only shot." Thora's voice crackled over the comm. "Understood, Captain. We'll clear a path for you. All ships, execute Maneuver Delta 7. The human Yadrin fleet moved with precision, their coordinated attacks carving a corridor through the Zarkov forces. Energy beams and projectiles crisscrossed the void, creating a deadly light show against the backdrop of space. Powell piloted the Stalwart Defender through the gauntlet, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to navigate the treacherous path. The ship's hull creaked and groaned as they neared Nexus Prime, the gravitational forces intensifying with each passing moment. On the station, Commander Vex led a team through smoke-filled corridors towards the Singularity Generator control room. They encountered pockets of Zarkov resistance, exchanging fire in close quarters. "Push through," Vex shouted, his voice hoarse from exertion. "We need to secure that control room." As Vex and his team fought their way forward, Powell maneuvered the Stalwart Defender into position. Warning lights flashed across the ship's bridge as systems began to fail under the gravitational strain. "Initiating energy pulse sequence," Powell announced, his enhanced mind allowing him to simultaneously monitor multiple systems and make split-second adjustments. The Stalwart Defender's hybrid engines hummed with power as they generated a massive surge of energy. A brilliant beam of light erupted from the ship, striking the heart of the Singularity. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent as the pulse connected with the gravitational anomaly. Then, a blinding flash engulfed Nexus Prime, temporarily overloading sensors across the system. Inside the station, Vex and his team reached the control room just as the energy pulse hit. They worked frantically, rerouting power and overriding safety protocols to harmonize with Powell's efforts. "Modulating singularity output now," Vex reported, his fingers dancing across the control panels. "Stability at 30% and rising." The Stalwart Defender shuddered violently as Powell fought to maintain its position. The ship's hull plates buckled under the immense gravitational forces, but Powell's enhanced abilities allowed him to make constant micro-adjustments, keeping the energy pulse focused. Across the battlefield, the liberated crews of the captured ships seized a moment of confusion. Led by Commander Sarah Taylor, they launched a surprise attack on the Zarkov rear guard. "All freed vessels, concentrate fire on their energy relays," Taylor ordered. "Let's give our people the advantage they need." The unexpected assault further fragmented the Zarkov fleet, their formations breaking apart as they struggled to respond to threats from multiple directions. Back on Nexus Prime, the warning alarms began to subside as the Singularity stabilized. Vex's team worked in perfect synchronization with Powell's efforts, gradually bringing the generator under control. Singularity stability at 85% and holding, Vex reported, relief evident in his voice. We've done it. As the immediate danger passed, Admiral Thora seized the initiative. All ships, execute attack pattern Omega. Target their weakened formations and press our advantage. The human Yatteran fleet surged forward, concentrating their fire on the disorganized Zarkov vessels. Explosions blossomed across space as the alien ships succumbed to the relentless assault. Faced with attacks from all sides and their command structure in ruins, the Zarkov began to retreat. Several damaged ships attempted to open hyperspace portals, but the lingering effects of the stabilized singularity interfered with their calculations. Some vessels vanished into unknown regions of space, while others were torn apart by the gravitational forces. As the last Zarkov ships fled the system, a cheer erupted across the human Yatteran fleet. They had achieved victory, but at a tremendous cost. The space around Nexus Prime was littered with debris and disabled vessels, a grim testament to the ferocity of the battle. Powell guided the battered Stalwart Defender back to Nexus Prime's main docking bay, the ship's scorched and buckled hull a testament to its close encounter with the Singularity. As the vessel touched down, medical teams rushed to assist the crew. High Counselor Jun and Admiral Thora convened an emergency meeting to assess the situation. The victory over the Zarkov had been hard-won, and the Alliance now faced the daunting task of repairs and recovery. As they discussed their next steps, long-range sensors detected new anomalies on the fringes of the system. The readings were faint but unmistakable, suggesting that the Zarkov incursion might have been just the opening move in a larger conflict. The human Yatteran Alliance had survived its trial by fire, but as they looked to the stars, they knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The battle for Nexus Prime was over, but the war for their future had only just begun. The human Yatteran Alliance had proven their mettle, but as they surveyed the aftermath of the battle, they knew their trials were just the beginning. Admiral Thora's voice cut through the calm chatter. All ships, initiate damage assessment and begin immediate repairs. We must be ready for whatever comes next. As the fleet scrambled to comply, long-range sensors lit up with new alerts. Faint but unmistakable energy signatures pulsed at the edges of the system, sending ripples of tension through the command center. High Counselor Jun's antenna twitched as he processed the data. Admiral, we need eyes on those anomalies. Now. Thora nodded, her cybernetic eye whirring as she scanned the tactical display. Agreed. Commander Taylor, assemble a scout team immediately. You're our best pilot, and we need someone with your experience out there. Sarah Taylor's voice crackled over the comm. Understood, Admiral. We'll be ready to launch in 10 minutes. As Taylor's team prepared for their reconnaissance mission, Captain Powell stirred in the medical bay. His enhanced physiology had begun to adapt to the extreme stress of the battle, accelerating his healing process. Despite the protests of Dr. Lyra, Powell pushed himself off the medical bed. Captain, you need rest, Lyra insisted, her holographic form flickering with concern. Powell shook his head, wincing slightly. No time, Doctor. The threat isn't over, and they need me out there. Ignoring the lingering pain, Powell made his way to the command center. He arrived just as Taylor's scout team was departing, their sleek ships disappearing into the void. High Counselor Jun turned as Powell entered. Captain, it's good to see you on your feet. We have much to discuss. Admiral Thora brought up a holographic display of Nexus Prime. The station took heavy damage during the battle. Commander Vex is overseeing repairs, but we need to completely redesign our defensive strategy. Powell's enhanced mind quickly processed the information. We can use some of the Zarkov technology we captured. Their energy deflectors could be integrated into our existing shield systems. As they discussed strategy, Commander Vex's voice came through the comm. High Counselor, Admiral, We've secured the outer rings and begun evacuation of damaged sectors. Mr. Blackwood's militia has been instrumental in maintaining order. Excellent work, Commander, Jim replied. Keep us updated on your progress. Hours passed as the Alliance worked tirelessly to fortify their position. Scientists pored over captured Zarkov technology, making breakthrough after breakthrough. Powell found himself working alongside them, his enhanced cognitive abilities proving invaluable in deciphering alien systems. Suddenly, an urgent transmission from Commander Taylor cut through the comm chatter. Admiral, we've encountered something unexpected. The command center fell silent as Taylor's report came in. Her team had discovered a massive debris field at the coordinates of the anomalies, filled with fragments of both Zarkov and unknown alien vessels. But it was what they found among the wreckage that sent a shockwave through the Alliance leadership. We retrieved several intact escape pods, Taylor explained, her voice tight with tension. They contain cryogenically preserved aliens. Species unknown. High Counselor Jun's antenna quivered with excitement. This could be a game changer. If we can establish communication, we might find new allies against the Zarkov. Admiral Thor's expression remained guarded. Or we could be inviting a new threat into our midst. We must proceed with caution. Powell stepped forward, his mind racing with possibilities. What if we revive just one of them? We can control the environment, minimize risks, but still open a channel for communication. As the leadership debated the merits of Powell's suggestion, alarms blared throughout the station. Lieutenant Chen's voice rang out, filled with urgency. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. It's the Zarkov, and they've brought an armada. The command center erupted into action. Admiral Thora barked orders, coordinating the fleet's defensive positions. Captain Powell, take command of our strike force. Integrate those captured Zarkov ships into our formation. Powell nodded, his enhanced mind already formulating strategies. Understood, Admiral. We'll use their own technology against them. As Powell raced to the docking bay, Commander Vek's voice came through his personal comm. Captain, we've implemented the new defense grid. Nexus Prime is as ready as she'll ever be. The hybrid fleet assembled around Nexus Prime, a motley array of human, Yadran, and repurposed Zarkov vessels. At its heart, the station's partially restored gravitational singularity generator hummed with power, ready to once again alter the course of battle. Powell took his place on the bridge of the stalwart defender, now upgraded with salvaged Zarkov tech. He opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, this is Captain Powell. We've faced the Zarkov before and emerged victorious. Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for the future of this entire sector. Stand ready. As the Zarkov armada approached, the Alliance's new detection system sprang to life. Data flooded in, revealing the enemy's formation and likely attack vectors. Powell's enhanced mind processed the information at lightning speed, adjusting their defensive strategy on the fly. All ships, assume formation Delta 9, Powell ordered. Concentrate fire on their lead vessels. We'll use Nexus Prime's gravity well to funnel them into killing zones. The space around Nexus Prime lit up with weapons fire as the two fleets clashed. Alliance fighters wove between larger vessels, hounding Zarkov ships with precision strikes. The station's energy deflectors flared as they absorbed incoming fire, Vex modifications holding strong against the onslaught. As the battle raged, Powell noticed a shift in the Zarkov tactics. They seemed to be probing for weaknesses, testing the Alliance's new defenses. He realized with a start that the enemy was adapting, learning from their previous defeat. Admiral, Powell called out, we need to change things up. They're anticipating our moves. Before Thora could respond, a massive energy surge erupted from the heart of the Zarkov fleet. A new vessel, larger than any they'd encountered before, emerged from the chaos. Its hull bristled with weapons, and its energy signature dwarfed anything their sensors had detected previously. As this behemoth of a ship advanced on Nexus Prime, Powell knew that the true test of the Human-Yatran alliance was about to begin. The battle for the future of the sector had entered a new, more dangerous phase, and the outcome hung in the balance. Balance. The colossal Zarkov vessel loomed ever closer, its presence casting a shadow over the battlefield, both literal and metaphorical. Powell's mind raced, processing countless tactical scenarios in milliseconds. He opened a secure channel to Admiral Thora and High Counselor Jun. "Admiral, Counselor, we need to implement Stratagem Omega. It's our best chance against that behemoth." Thora's voice crackled over the comm, tension evident even through the static. "Understood, Captain. All ships, form up on Powell's lead. Execute Stratagem Omega on his mark." As the Alliance fleet reconfigured its formation, Powell directed his attention to the hybrid strike force. "Strike team, on my signal, we're going to punch straight through their lines. Target their propulsion systems and weapon emplacements. We need to create chaos in their ranks." The hybrid fleet surged forward, repurposed Zarkov ships at the forefront. The enemy hesitated, their targeting systems confounded by the sight of what appeared to be their own vessels charging towards them. Powell seized the moment of confusion, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to navigate the stalwart defender through a hail of plasma fire. "Now, Commander Vex," Powell shouted into his comm. "Initiate the gravitational pulses." On Nexus Prime, Vex's fingers danced across the control panels. The station's gravitational singularity generator hummed to life, sending visible ripples through space. The fabric of reality seemed to bend and twist around the Alliance ships as they plunged into the corridor of distorted space-time. Powell gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain control of his ship as it bucked and shuddered under the intense gravitational forces. Through the view screen, he watched as enemy vessels were tossed about like leaves in a storm, their formations shattering under the onslaught of unpredictable gravity wells. "All ships, maintain your heading," Powell ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "Use the gravitational fluctuations to your advantage. Let them guide your evasive maneuvers." The Alliance fleet wove through the Zarkov lines, their erratic movements defying the enemy's targeting systems. Lances of energy and streams of projectiles crisscrossed the void, most missing their marks as the gravity wells bent their trajectories. As they closed in on the massive Zarkov dreadnought, Powell noticed a shift in the enemy's tactics. The behemoth vessel began to power up what appeared to be an enormous energy weapon, its hull splitting apart to reveal a pulsing core of terrifying power. "Vex, we need more interference," Powell shouted. "Can you increase the gravitational distortions?" "I'm pushing the generator to its limits, Captain," Vex replied, his voice strained. "Any more and we risk tearing the station apart." Powell's mind raced, calculating trajectories and energy outputs. "Redirect all power to the forward shields," he ordered his crew. "We're going to punch straight through their defenses before they can fire that weapon." As the stalwart defender led the charge, the rest of the Alliance fleet spread out, peppering the dreadnought's hull with a relentless barrage of fire. The massive ship's shields flickered under the assault, but held firm. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the calm chatter. "Captain Powell, this is Dr. Voss in the medical bay. We have a situation with the alien revival process." Powell cursed under his breath. The timing couldn't have been worse. "What's the problem, Doctor?" "The alien's life signs are highly unstable," Voss reported, her voice tight with tension. "Its biology is reacting violently to our life support systems. We're losing it." Powell's enhanced mind quickly weighed the implications. The alien could be their key to understanding the Zarkov, possibly even finding a way to end this war. But the immediate threat of the dreadnought loomed large. "Do whatever you can to stabilize the alien, Doctor," Powell decided. But our priority right now is surviving this battle. As if to emphasize his point, the Zarkov dreadnought's energy weapon flared to life. A blinding beam of pure destruction lanced out, cutting through space towards Nexus Prime. Evasive maneuvers, Powell shouted, but he knew it was too late. The beam was too wide, too powerful to avoid completely. Just as impact seemed imminent, a series of rapid gravitational pulses erupted from Nexus Prime. The energy beam twisted and warped, its trajectory bending just enough to graze the station's outer shields instead of striking it head-on. "Nice work, Vex," Powell breathed, allowing himself a momentary sigh of relief. "It wasn't me, Captain," Vex replied, confusion evident in his voice. "That pulse pattern didn't come from our systems." Before Powell could process this new information, his tactical display lit up with fresh alerts. The Zarkov dreadnought's shields were fluctuating, creating a brief window of vulnerability. "All ships, concentrate fire on the dreadnought's port side," Powell ordered. "This is our chance." As the Alliance fleet unleashed a coordinated assault on the weakened section of the dreadnought's defenses, Powell's mind raced to connect the dots. The gravitational pulses that saved Nexus Prime, the dreadnought's sudden vulnerability. It couldn't be a coincidence. His suspicions were confirmed moments later, when Dr. Voss's voice came through the comm once more. "Captain, the alien. It's awake, and it's doing something to our systems." Systems. The alien's vital signs had stabilized, and it was interacting with the medical equipment in ways Dr. Voss had never seen before. Powell's mind raced, connecting the dots between the gravitational anomalies and the alien's awakening. "Doctor, what exactly is the alien doing?" Before Voss could respond, a new voice cut through the comm channel. It was unlike anything Powell had ever heard, melodic yet precise, with an otherworldly quality that sent shivers down his spine. "I am Zelera of the Azurians," the voice announced. "Your technology is primitive, but I have adapted it to save your station. Now, allow me to help you defeat our common enemy." Powell exchanged a quick glance with his bridge crew, their expressions mirroring his own mix of shock and hope. "Zelera, this is Captain Powell. We welcome your assistance, but we're in the middle of a critical battle. What can you tell us about the Zarkov weaknesses?" As Zelera began to speak, Powell's tactical display lit up with new information. The alien was somehow interfacing directly with Nexus Prime systems, highlighting vulnerabilities in the Zarkov dreadnought's design that had been invisible to their sensors. "The Zarkov power distribution system is flawed," Zelera explained, her voice calm despite the chaos of battle surrounding them. "A precisely targeted electromagnetic pulse can disable their primary systems, leaving them defenseless." Powell's enhanced mind quickly processed the implications of this information. "Vex, can we modify our weapons to generate an EMP burst?" "Affirmative, Captain," Vex replied, his fingers already flying over the control panels. "Reconfiguring now. We'll need to get close to maximize the effect." Powell opened a channel to the entire strike force. "All ships, form up on me. We're going to punch through their defenses and deliver a knockout blow." The hybrid fleet surged forward, repurposed Zarkov ships leading the charge. Enemy fire intensified as they approached, but the gravitational distortions continued to play havoc with the Zarkov targeting systems. "Stalwart Defender, this is Dr. Voss," the medical officer's voice crackled over the comm. "Zelera insists on joining you on the bridge. She says her direct interface with our systems will increase our chances of success." Powell hesitated for a split second before making his decision. "Bring her up, Doctor. We need every advantage we can get." Moments later, the bridge doors hissed open, revealing a sight that momentarily stunned the entire crew. Zelera glided into the room, her form unlike anything they had ever encountered. She was tall and slender, with iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Multiple appendages, somewhere between arms and tentacles, moved with fluid grace as she approached the main console. "Captain Powell," Zellera acknowledged, her multifaceted eyes focusing on him with unnerving intensity. "Your ship systems are now an extension of my consciousness. I will guide your weapons to their target." As the Azurian interfaced with the ship's computers, the tactical display came alive with new information. Powell watched in awe as firing solutions and navigational data flowed across the screen faster than even his enhanced mind could process. "All ships, prepare to fire on my mark," Powell ordered, his voice steady despite the tension gripping his chest. "Coordinate your shots with the data Zellera is providing." The stalwart defender shuddered as it plowed through the gravitational eddies, emerging at the head of the strike force directly in front of the massive Zarkov dreadnought. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the two forces faced each other across the void. "Now!" Powell shouted, his fingers slamming down on the firing control. A blinding pulse of electromagnetic energy erupted from the stalwart defender, amplified and focused by the combined fire of the entire strike force. It struck the dreadnought dead center, spreading across its hull like a web of lightning. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Zarkov vessel's lights flickered and died, its weapons falling silent as cascading failures tore through its systems. Powell watched in amazement as the previously impenetrable behemoth hung dead in space, vulnerable and exposed. "All ships, concentrate fire on their primary power core," Powell ordered, his voice tight with the effort of containing his excitement. "Let's finish this." The Alliance fleet unleashed a furious barrage, their weapons tearing through the dreadnought's unprotected hull. Explosions blossomed across its surface as critical systems overloaded and ruptured. As the massive ship began to break apart, the remaining Zarkov fleet fell into disarray. Some attempted to flee, while others fought on with increasing desperation. "Admiral Thora," Powell called out, "the enemy flagship is neutralized. What are your orders?" Thora's voice came through clear and decisive. "Excellent work, Captain. Move to intercept the retreating vessels. We can't let them escape to warn the rest of the Zarkov forces." As the stalwart defender banked away from the disintegrating dreadnought, Powell turned to Zellera. The Azurian's expression was unreadable, but there was a new intensity in her gaze. "Your assistance was invaluable," Powell said, choosing his words carefully. "But I suspect this is just the beginning of a much larger conflict." Zellera's response was solemn. "Indeed, Captain, the Zarkov Empire spans vast regions of space. This battle, while significant, is merely the opening move in a war that will shape the destiny of our galaxies." As the Alliance fleet moved to secure their hard-won victory, Powell couldn't shake the feeling that the true challenges were yet to come. The revelation of the Azurians and their advanced knowledge had changed everything. Now, as they prepared to board the captured Zarkov vessels and sift through the wreckage for intelligence, he knew that the future of the Human-Yadran Alliance, and perhaps the fate of the entire sector, hung in the balance. Balance hung in the balance. The future of their civilizations would be decided by the actions they took in the coming days and weeks. As the captured Zarkov vessels were secured and the wreckage of the enemy dreadnought was methodically searched for intelligence, Captain Powell found himself summoned to Nexus Prime's newly fortified command center. The station's corridors buzzed with activity as he made his way through, crews working tirelessly to repair damage and implement upgrades based on the wealth of new information at their disposal. Stepping into the command center, Powell was greeted by the sight of Admiral Thora and High Counselor Jun hunched over a holographic display of the sector. The Yadran leaders looked up as he entered, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and dedication. "Captain," Admiral Thora acknowledged, her silvery scales reflecting the soft blue light of the display. "Your timing is impeccable. We were just reviewing the data extracted from the Zarkov ships." Powell nodded, his enhanced mind already processing the information, scrolling across nearby screens. What have we learned? High Counselor Jun gestured to the holographic map, where a pulsing red icon stood out among the sea of stars. We've identified a critical Zarkov facility, designated Nexus Omega. It appears to be their primary staging ground for fleet operations in this sector. As Powell studied the tactical overlay, a familiar voice joined the conversation. Zelera glided into the room, her iridescent form drawing the eye of every being present. The Zarkov depend heavily on centralized logistics, the Azurian explained, interfacing directly with the holographic display. The image shifted, revealing detailed schematics of the enemy facility. A strike against Nexus Omega would cripple their ability to launch large-scale invasions for the foreseeable future. Admiral Thora's mandibles clicked in agreement. We're proposing a preemptive strike. Hit them before they can regroup and bring their full might to bear. Powell's mind raced, analyzing potential strategies and outcomes. It's bold, he admitted, but it could turn the tide of the war if we succeed. High Counselor Jin nodded gravely. Indeed, and that's why we need you to take point on this operation, Captain. Your experience with both our technology and theirs makes you uniquely qualified to lead this assault. Over the next several hours, the Alliance leadership hammered out the details of their audacious plan. Powell found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity, overseeing the integration of captured Zarkov technology into Alliance vessels, while simultaneously planning the upcoming strike. In the station's vast hangar bays, human and Yadran engineers worked side by side, retrofitting ships with hybrid weapon systems. Powell moved from team to team, his enhanced cognitive abilities allowing him to quickly solve integration issues and optimize performance. "How's it coming along?" he asked, approaching a group working on a sleek Yadran cruiser. Chief Engineer Rala, her tentacles manipulating multiple tools at once, looked up from her work. "We're making progress, Captain. The Zarkov power couplings are finicky, but we're adapting. This ship will have triple its original firepower when we're done." Powell nodded approvingly, already moving on to the next project. As he worked, he couldn't help but marvel at the rapid advancements they were making. Ships that had once struggled to match Zarkov firepower were being transformed into formidable hybrid vessels, capable of going toe-to-toe with the enemy's best. Meanwhile, throughout Nexus Prime, other key players were contributing to the war effort. Commander Vex oversaw a series of critical upgrades to the station's defenses, incorporating Azurian shield technology provided by Zelera. The new systems hummed with power, creating an almost impenetrable barrier around the Alliance's most vital asset. In the medical bay, Dr. Alara Voss and her team worked tirelessly to revive the remaining Azurian survivors. Each awakening brought new insights into Zarkov tactics and technology, which were immediately fed into the Alliance's strategic planning. Admiral Thora took charge of recruitment and training, establishing joint facilities where humans and Yadrans learned to operate the new hybrid technologies side by side. The sound of simulated battles echoed through training grounds as soldiers and pilots honed their skills, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. As preparations for the strike against Nexus Omega progressed, Powell found himself leading a series of high-risk reconnaissance missions deep into Zarkov-controlled space. Using captured enemy ships outfitted with enhanced cloaking technology, his team mapped out approach vectors and defense patterns around the target facility. During one such mission, as the Stalwart Vengeance, Powell's flagship and a heavily modified Zarkov cruiser skirted the edge of a dense asteroid field. Their sensors picked up an anomalous energy signature. "Captain," the sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting unusual power fluctuations from a nearby planetoid. It doesn't match any known Zarkov patterns." Powell's eyes narrowed as he studied the readouts. "Take us in closer, but maintain cloak. I want a visual." As they approached, the true nature of the facility became clear. Hidden within the cratered surface of the planetoid was a Zarkov research outpost, its architecture unmistakable even through the cloaking field that shrouded it. "Life signs," Powell asked, a knot forming in his stomach. The sensor officer's voice was grim. Multiple species detected, sir, including Azurian biosignatures. Powell's mind raced, processing the implications of their discovery. This wasn't just a research outpost. It was a prison where the Zarkov conducted experiments on captured alien species. The information they could gain from this facility could be invaluable, but the ethical implications of leaving sentient beings to suffer were unthinkable. As the stalwart Vengeance slipped back into deep space, Powell knew their plans would need to change. The strike against Nexus Omega was still vital, but now they had a moral imperative to rescue the prisoners held in that hidden outpost. Returning to Nexus Prime, Powell presented his findings to the Alliance leadership. The command center erupted into heated debate as they weighed the risks and potential rewards of expanding their mission. "We can't ignore this," Powell argued, his voice firm. "Not only is it our duty to free those prisoners, but the intelligence we could gain from that facility could be the key to defeating the Zarkov once and for all." After hours of deliberation, a new plan emerged. The assault on Nexus Omega would proceed as planned, with Admiral Thora leading the main force. Meanwhile, a smaller, elite team commanded by Powell would split off to infiltrate the research outpost, free the prisoners, and gather crucial intelligence. As the day of the operation approached, Nexus Prime became a hive of activity. Final preparations were made across the Alliance. Ships received last-minute upgrades, troops drilled in simulated combat scenarios, and supply lines were established to support the extended campaign into enemy territory. Standing on the bridge of the stalwart Vengeance, Captain Powell watched as the assault fleet assembled. Hundreds of ships, ranging from nimble fighters to massive capital ships, fell into formation around Nexus Prime. Each vessel represented the pinnacle of human, Yadran, and Azurian cooperation, a testament to what they could achieve when united against a common foe. Admiral Thora's voice crackled over the comm channel, addressing the entire fleet. "This is the moment we've been preparing for. Today, we take the fight to the enemy. Today, we show the Zarkov that the free peoples of this galaxy will not bow to their tyranny." As the fleet began its synchronized jump to hyperspace, Powell felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The outcome of this bold strike could change the course of the war, and the fate of countless lives hung in the balance. With a final glance at the receding form of Nexus Prime, he steeled himself for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that the true test of their newfound alliance was about to begin. Knowing that the true test of their newfound alliance was about to unfold. The stalwart Vengeance emerged from hyperspace on the outskirts of the Nexus Omega system, immediately greeted by a swarm of Zarkov warships. Powell's enhanced senses took in the chaotic scene before him, tracking the movements of countless enemy vessels as they converged on the Alliance fleet. "All hands battle stations," he ordered, his voice calm despite the sudden onslaught. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." As Admiral Thora's main force engaged the Zarkov fleet in a massive space battle, the stalwart Vengeance broke away from the fray. Powell expertly guided the ship towards a hidden research outpost, weaving through a dense asteroid field that separated them from their target. "Sir, multiple Zarkov patrols detected," the sensor officer reported, her voice tense. Powell's fingers danced across the control panel, making minute adjustments to their trajectory. "Maintain cloak and follow my lead," he instructed. The ship glided silently through the asteroid field, narrowly avoiding collisions as they evaded the enemy patrols. As they approached the outpost, Powell activated the captured Zarkov codes. The facility's docking bay doors slid open, allowing the stalwart Vengeance to slip inside undetected. "Team Alpha with me," Powell commanded as he strapped on his tactical gear. "Team Beta, secure the ship and prepare for rapid extraction." The elite strike force moved swiftly through the outpost corridors, their hybrid weapons at the ready. They encountered the first group of Zarkov, guards outside a security checkpoint. Powell raised his hand, signaling his team to hold position. In a blur of motion, he charged forward, enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge enemy fire. He engaged the guards in close combat, his augmented strength overpowering them before they could raise the alarm. "Clear," he called out, gesturing for his team to advance. As they pressed deeper into the facility, they came across rows of holding cells. Inside, prisoners of various species huddled, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. "Get these cells open," Powell ordered, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We're getting everyone out of here." As his team worked to free the prisoners, Powell accessed a nearby terminal. His enhanced mind processed the data at an incredible speed, sifting through research logs and security protocols. "Captain," one of his officers called out, "we've located a group of Azurians in the high-security wing." Powell nodded, his expression grim. "Let's move. Stay alert. We don't know what other surprises this place might have in store for us." Meanwhile, the battle at Nexus Omega intensified. Admiral Thora's voice crackled over the secure channel. "Captain Powell, we've engaged the enemy fleet. Their defenses are formidable, but we're holding our own." "Understood, Admiral." Powell responded as he led his team through the winding corridors of the outpost. "We've infiltrated the research facility and are proceeding with the extraction." They fought their way through several more security checkpoints, the hybrid weapons proving devastatingly effective against Zarkot defenses. As they approached the high-security wing, Powell noticed a change in the facility's architecture. The walls were lined with unfamiliar technology, pulsing with an eerie blue light. "Stay sharp," he warned his team. "We're entering unknown territory." The high-security wing was guarded by a squad of heavily armored Zarkov soldiers. Powell's team engaged them in a fierce firefight, the narrow corridor limiting their maneuverability. Using his enhanced abilities, Powell vaulted over the enemy line, flanking them from behind. The surprised Zarkov troops were quickly overwhelmed. Inside the wing, they found a group of Azurians suspended in stasis fields. Powell's medic immediately began working to safely extract them while the rest of the team secured the area. As Powell accessed another terminal, his eyes widened. "We've got a problem," he announced. "I've found plans for a Zarkov superweapon, something capable of destabilizing entire star systems." He quickly relayed the information to Admiral Thora and began downloading all available data. "We need to destroy this facility," he decided. "Set charges at key structural points. We'll detonate them on our way out." As his team prepared the facility for destruction, Powell heard a commotion from a nearby chamber. He entered cautiously, finding himself face to face with a Zarkov commander. The alien's multiple eyes narrowed as it regarded Powell. "You are too late," it hissed. "Our great migration cannot be stopped." Powell raised his weapon but didn't fire. "Migration? What are you talking about?" The commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh. "You think we wage this war for conquest? We fight for survival. Our home galaxy is dying, and we must find a new one at any cost." This revelation hit Powell like a physical blow. The implications were staggering, potentially changing the entire nature of the conflict. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of the war. "Your methods are brutal and unjustifiable," Powell said firmly. "But if what you say is true, there may be another way. Defect, share your knowledge with us. Together, we might find a solution that doesn't involve the subjugation of entire species." The Zarkov commander hesitated, its alien features unreadable. Powell could almost see the calculations happening behind those compound eyes. Finally, it spoke. "Your offer is unexpected. Perhaps there is wisdom in cooperation." As alarms began to blare throughout the facility, Powell gestured urgently. "We need to move. Now." With the defector in tow and the freed prisoners secured, Powell's team raced back to the stalwart Vengeance. They boarded just as the first explosions began to rock the outpost. All hands braced for impact, Powell ordered as he took the helm. The ship shot out of the disintegrating facility, the shockwave of its destruction scrambling nearby Zarkov communications. As they emerged from the asteroid field, Powell saw that the tide of the battle had turned. With the intelligence provided by the defector, Admiral Thora had launched a precision strike on Nexus Omega's main power core. The Zarkov supply hub was in chaos, its defenses crumbling under the Alliance's assault. Victory seemed within reach when a massive shadow fell across the battlefield. Powell's blood ran cold as he recognized the shape emerging from hyperspace, a Zarkov dreadnought of unprecedented size, its weapon systems already powering up. All ships, evasive action, Powell shouted into the comm, but it was too late. The dreadnought unleashed a barrage of fire that tore through a significant portion of the Alliance fleet. As he watched the destruction unfold, Powell's mind raced. The dreadnought matched the descriptions in the superweapon plans he had discovered. They couldn't let it escape. The fate of the entire sector depended on it. Powell's hands tightened on the controls of the stalwart Vengeance. A plan was forming in his mind. Audacious, probably suicidal, but potentially their only chance. He opened a channel to Admiral Thora. "Admiral, I have an idea, but it's going to get messy."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.